I sat in the airport lounge, staring at the condensation on my cold brew, when my sister screamed through the phone that strangers were in my house and calling the police. I did not panic. I simply asked who was there and if they had seen the papers. My parents thought they gave my sister a fresh start, but they actually gifted her a trespassing charge. The cruelest twist was that the new owner was no stranger to my career. My name is Madeline Knight, and for the first time in 36 years, I felt the specific, weightless sensation of being untethered. I was sitting in one of those white wooden rocking chairs that line the atrium of Charlotte Douglas International Airport. If you have ever flown through CLT, you know the ones. They overlook the runway, offering a front row seat to the ballet of logistics happening on the tarmac. I had a large cold brew in my hand, the ice just starting to melt against the plastic, creating a ring of water on the small table beside me. It was 10 in the morning on a Tuesday. I was wearing my travel uniform, which consisted of a charcoal blazer, dark denim, and loafers that were easy to slip off at security. Most people look stressed at airports. They are running late, or they are dragging screaming toddlers, or they are anxiously checking the departure board because their connection is tight. I was none of those people. I was calm. I was terrifyingly calm. I was waiting for a flight to Chicago to start a consulting contract with a manufacturing firm that needed their entire compliance department overhauled. It was the kind of job I excelled at for Northgate Risk and Compliance. I was good at seeing where the cracks were. I was good at identifying the liabilities that everyone else was too polite or too blind to point out. For the last decade, I had treated my own life like a risk assessment file, and the findings were always the same. The biggest liability was not the stock market, and it was not my health, and it was not the volatility of the housing sector. The biggest liability was my last name. I took a sip of the coffee. It was bitter and strong, exactly how I needed it to be. I watched a Delta jet push back from the gate. I felt a vibration in my pocket. It was a long, aggressive buzz that signaled a call, not a text. I pulled my phone out. The screen lit up with a photo I had taken 3 Christmases ago. It was my younger sister, Brielle. In the photo, she was laughing, holding a glass of champagne that I had paid for, wearing a sweater that I had bought her. I stared at the screen. My thumb hovered over the decline button. I had already said my goodbyes. I had told my parents, Grant and Lydia, that I would be traveling for work and would be unreachable for a few days while I settled in. I had told Brielle that I was going to be busy, but the phone kept buzzing. It was persistent, almost frantic. A professional instinct kicked in. In my line of work, you do not ignore the red flags. You investigate them, you mitigate them, and then you document them. I slid my thumb across the screen and brought the phone to my ear. "Hello, Brielle," I said. My voice was steady. It was the voice I used when a client told me they had lost $250,000 in inventory and did not know how. I was not prepared for the sound that assaulted my eardrum. It was a scream. It was not a scream of joy, and it was not a scream of surprise. It was the guttural, high-pitched shrieking of a child who has been denied a toy, mixed with the genuine terror of an adult who has suddenly realized the world does not work the way they thought it did. "They are calling the police, Madeline. They are calling the police." Her voice cracked and shattered on the last word. She was hyperventilating. I could hear the wet, gasping intake of breath that she did whenever she wanted sympathy, but there was an undercurrent of real fear this time. I sat up straighter in the rocking chair. The peaceful morning at the airport dissolved. The noise of the terminal faded into a dull hum, replaced by the chaotic audio feed coming from my sister's end of the line. "Who is calling the police, Brielle?" I asked. I did not stand up. I did not run toward the gate agent. I stayed perfectly still. "The people," she screamed. "There are people in the house. They are in the living room. They walked right in while I was unpacking." I closed my eyes for a fraction of a second. The pieces of the puzzle slammed together in my mind with the violence of a car crash. I heard a thud in the background, like a heavy door being slammed. Then I heard a male voice. It was distant, but it was angry. It was a baritone rumble that cut through Brielle's sobbing. "You need to get out. The man's voice roared in the background. "I do not care who you think you are. This is our property." "No!" That was Brielle screaming back at him. "It is my sister's house. My mom said I have the keys. She gave me the keys." The sentence hung in the air between Charlotte and Raleigh. "Mom said I have the keys." I did not ask the obvious question a normal sister would ask. "Brielle, why are you at my house?" A normal sister would ask. "What do you mean you are unpacking?" I was not a normal sister. I was a survivor of the Knight family dynamic. I knew exactly why she was there. My parents, Grant and Lydia, had done what they always did. They had identified a resource, my home, and they had reallocated it to the family member in need, Brielle, without consulting the owner of the resource. They had kept a spare key, the emergency key that I had given my father 5 years ago when I went to Europe for 2 weeks. I had asked for it back a dozen times. He had always claimed he lost it, or he left it in his other jacket, or he would bring it next time. They hadn't lost it. They had banked it. They were saving it for a rainy day, and apparently, Brielle's latest breakup or eviction or life crisis was that rainy day. "Madeline!" Brielle wailed into the phone. Tell them it is okay. They are threatening to arrest me." "Put the phone down." "Brielle," I said. "What?" "Do not hang up. Just put the phone in your pocket. I need to make a call." "You need to talk to them," she screeched. "I am going to handle it," I said. "Just stop screaming." I muted the call. I did not hang up on her. I wanted to hear what was happening. I placed my phone on the small table next to my melting cold brew. With movements that felt mechanical and precise, I reached into my leather tote bag and pulled out my laptop. It was a ThinkPad, sturdy and black. I flipped it open. The screen came to life instantly. I bypassed the airport Wi-Fi and connected to my personal hotspot. I needed security. I needed speed. My fingers flew across the keyboard. I navigated to my cloud storage. I did not go to my photos. I did not go to my emails. I went to a folder labeled Personal Assets Archived. Inside that folder was a subfolder titled 140 Maple Drive Closing. I double-clicked it. The files populated the screen. The settlement statement, the deed, the bill of sale, the transfer of keys acknowledgement form. I looked at the date on the final signature page. It was dated exactly 14 days ago. I felt a cold rage settle in my stomach. It was not the hot, fiery anger that makes you shout. It was the cold, clinical anger of a surgeon who realizes the patient lied about their medical history. My parents had waited until they thought I was safely out of the state, distracted by a new job, and then they had moved my sister into my home. They thought I would just accept it. They thought I would say, "Oh well, she is already there. Let her stay for a few months." They thought the house was still mine. I minimized the window and opened my contacts. I searched for Lane, Marissa Lane. She was the buyer. A young woman, maybe 28. She was pregnant. I recalled, she and her husband, Caleb, had bought the house off-market. They were looking for a safe place to raise their family. They had loved the quartz countertops I had installed. They had loved the fenced-in backyard. They were good people. They had paid $450,000 for the privilege of calling that place home. I hit the call button on my laptop, routing the audio through my AirPods. It rang once, twice. "Hello?" The voice was breathless. It was trembling. "Marissa," I said. "This is Madeline Knight." "Madeline." She sounded like she was on the verge of tears. "Oh my God. Madeline, I do not know what is happening. There is a woman in my living room. She unlocked the front door. She has boxes. She is screaming at Caleb." "I know," I said. "I am so sorry. Marissa, is Caleb the one yelling?" "Yes," Marissa said. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "He is on the phone with the 911 dispatcher right now. We came home from the hardware store, and she was just inside. She was sitting on the sofa eating yogurt. She told us to get out." I closed my eyes. The image of Brielle, sitting on a sofa that didn't belong to her, eating food she didn't buy, in a house she didn't own, was so perfectly emblematic of my entire childhood that it almost made me laugh. But there was no humor here, only liability. "Marissa," I said. Listen to me very carefully. Are you near the woman? She is in the foyer now. Caleb is blocking her from going back into the kitchen. I need you to walk over to her, I said. I need you to put me on speakerphone. Make sure it is loud. Madeline, she is crazy. She keeps saying her mom gave her the house. Do it, Marissa, please. I heard a shuffling sound. I heard the background noise get louder. I heard Brielle's voice, shrill and piercing. Call my sister. She will tell you she owns this place. I have her on the phone, Marissa said. Her voice was shaking, but she was brave. I have Madeline on the phone. The screaming stopped abruptly. Maddie. Brielle's voice was wet with relief. Oh, thank God. Maddie, tell these freaks to leave. They are trying to scare me. Tell them Mom said I could stay here. I took a breath. The air in the airport terminal smelled of floor wax and Cinnabon. I looked at the flight board. My flight was boarding in 40 minutes. I had 40 minutes to burn my old life to the ground. Brielle, I said. My voice filled the room in Raleigh. Amplified by Marissa's phone, I made sure I spoke with absolute clarity. Brielle, listen to me. Tell them, she demanded. I am Madeline Knight, I said, announcing myself to everyone in that room, to Brielle, to Marissa, to Caleb, and potentially to the 911 dispatcher if they were still on the line. I am the former owner of the property at 140 Maple Drive. There was a pause. Former, Brielle said. It was a small, confused sound. I confirm that I sold this property 14 days ago, I said. I signed the closing documents on the 12th of the month. The deed was recorded with the county clerk the following morning. I have the settlement statement open in front of me right now. Silence. It was a heavy, suffocating silence. It was the sound of a narrative collapsing. My parents had built a reality for Brielle, where I was the safety net, the eternal provider, the bank that never closed, and with 2 sentences, I had just foreclosed on that reality. What? Brielle whispered. No, Mom said you were just going away for work. I am going away for work, I said. And I sold my house before I left. I do not own that house. Brielle, you have broken into a stranger's home. But I have a key, she shouted, her voice rising again, trying to find purchase on a slippery slope. Mom gave me the key, the emergency key. That key was for my house, I said ruthlessly. That house does not exist anymore. You are holding a key to a door that legally belongs to Mr. and Mrs. Lane. I heard a gasp. It might have been Marissa. It might have been Brielle. Madeline, you can't do this, Brielle whimpered. I have all my stuff in the car. I gave up my apartment. Mom said, I do not care what Mom said. I cut her off. Mom does not own that house either. Mom has never owned that house. I shifted my focus. Marissa, are you still there? Yes, Marissa said. Her voice was stronger now. She had the truth on her side. She realized she wasn't the crazy one. Marissa, does the woman in your house have a lease? I asked. No, Marissa said. Did you give her permission to enter? No. Did you give her a key? No. Then she is trespassing, I said. I am emailing you the closing documents right now as a PDF. You can show them to the police when they arrive to prove ownership. Madeline! Brielle screamed. It was a sound of pure betrayal. You can't let them arrest me. I am your sister. If you are my sister, you should know better than to break into a house. I said, I suggest you pick up your boxes and walk out the front door before the patrol car turns the corner. That is the only advice I can give you. I have nowhere to go. That is not the homeowner's problem, I said, and it is not my problem. Grant is going to kill you, she shrieked. She was invoking our father's name like a weapon. He is going to be so mad. He can take it up with the new owners, I said. I looked at my laptop screen. The email to Marissa was composed. I attached the PDF. I hit send. Marissa, I said. The email is sent. If she is not off your property in 2 minutes, let the officers handle it. You have my full cooperation. Thank you, Madeline, Marissa said. There was a mix of pity and horror in her voice. She was looking at my sister, and she was seeing the wreckage of a family that she had thankfully never been part of. "Goodbye," I said. I disconnected the call on my laptop. Then I reached over and ended the call on my phone, where the muted line had been recording the ambient noise of my sister's meltdown. I sat there for a moment in the white rocking chair. My heart was beating a little faster than usual, perhaps 80 beats per minute instead of my resting 60, but my hands were steady. I picked up my cold brew. The ice had melted significantly. Watering down the coffee, I took a sip anyway. It tasted like freedom. I checked the time. 35 minutes until boarding. I had just detonated a nuclear bomb in the center of my family, and I was about to get on a plane to a city where none of them could find me. My phone buzzed again, then a third time. Text messages were flooding in. From Mom. "Brielle just called me screaming. What is going on?" From Dad. "Pick up the phone. Now." From Brielle. "They are here. The cops are here. Madeline, help me." I looked at the notifications sliding down the screen. I watched them pile up like debris. I opened the settings menu on my phone. I scrolled down to Do Not Disturb. I turned it on. Then, for good measure, I went to my contacts and set a specific rule for Grant, Lydia, and Brielle. Route to voicemail. I closed the laptop and slid it back into my bag. I stood up, smoothed the front of my blazer, and walked toward the security checkpoint for the B concourse. The flight to Chicago was on time. I was not running away. I was simply moving forward. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't dragging the dead weight of the Knight family with me, but as I walked, I knew this wasn't over. I knew my father. I knew Grant Knight did not handle humiliation well, and I knew Lydia Knight did not handle losing control well. They would not see this as a legal transaction where they were in the wrong. They would see this as an act of war. I smiled at the TSA agent as I handed him my boarding pass. "Heading home?" he asked, glancing at my ID. "No," I said. "I am heading away from it." "Have a safe flight, Ms. Knight?" "I intend to," I said. I walked down the jet bridge, the sound of my loafers clicking against the metal floor. I had fired the first shot, or rather, I had returned fire after years of being used as a human shield. They had given my sister the keys to a house I no longer owned. I wondered how long it would take them to realize that I hadn't just sold the house. I had sold the only leverage they had left. To understand why I felt a profound sense of peace while my sister screamed at police officers in my former living room, you have to understand the geography of my childhood. We grew up in a suburb just outside of Raleigh, North Carolina, in a house that was always slightly too warm and filled with the noise of my sister's existence. If families are corporations, Brielle was the brand ambassador, and I was the back-office IT support that everyone ignored until the server crashed. I was the easy child. That was the label the neighbors used, and my parents wore it like a badge of honor. "Madeline is so self-sufficient," they would say, clinking wine glasses at neighborhood barbecues. "Madeline never needs anything." They said it as if my lack of needs was a genetic trait, like brown eyes or curly hair, rather than a survival mechanism I had developed because there was no oxygen left in the room after Brielle inhaled it all. Brielle was the sunshine. She was chaotic, loud, charming, and utterly incapable of managing the consequences of her own actions. The dynamic solidified when I was 16. That was the year the disparity moved from emotional to financial. For her 16th birthday, Brielle received a brand new vehicle. It was a cherry red sedan with a big white bow on the hood, parked in the driveway for all the neighbors to see. I remember standing on the porch, watching her scream and jump into Grant's arms, weeping with gratitude. My 16th birthday had passed 2 years prior. I had received a card, a cake, and a very serious lecture from Grant about the importance of fiscal responsibility. He sat me down at the kitchen table and explained that they were teaching me the value of $1. He told me that walking to the bus stop would build character. He told me that earning my own way would make me stronger. I believed him then. I wanted to be strong. I wanted to be the responsible Knight daughter. I did not realize until years later that character was just a budget line item they were unwilling to spend on me because they had already allocated those funds to Brielle's latest whim. They had two phrases that they deployed with military precision: family duty and you are so strong. Whenever Brielle needed help, it was my family duty to provide it. Whenever I needed help, I was reminded that I was strong enough to handle it alone. It was a brilliant rhetorical trap. If I complained, I was failing my duty. If I asked for assistance, I was admitting I wasn't strong. So I stayed silent, and I stayed strong, and I stayed cheap. I put myself through university by working shifts at a coffee shop that opened at 5 in the morning. I smelled like roasted beans and burnt milk for 4 years. I took out loans. I bought used textbooks that were falling apart at the spine. I graduated with honors, and my parents came to the ceremony, took a few photos, and left early because Brielle had a crisis with a boyfriend that required immediate mediation. Brielle's college experience was different. Grant and Lydia called it investing in her future. They paid her tuition. They paid the rent on an apartment that was nicer than any place I had ever lived. When she failed a semester because she was too depressed to go to class, they paid for her to retake the credits. When she racked up $3,000 on a credit card, buying clothes she did not need, Grant paid it off quietly so she would not ruin her credit score. I watched this from the sidelines, not with jealousy, but with a growing, cold realization. I was not part of the investment strategy. I was the hedge. I was the insurance policy they kept in the drawer just in case the main asset failed. After graduation, I landed a job at Northgate Risk and Compliance. It was not a glamorous job. It involved auditing, spreadsheets, and telling powerful men that their sloppy decisions were going to cost them millions in regulatory fines. I loved it. At Northgate, I learned to see the world as a system of inputs and outputs. I learned that every organization has error makers and error fixers. The error makers generate chaos, often because they are charismatic and vision-driven, or simply reckless. The error fixers come in behind them with brooms and dustpans, sweeping up the broken glass so business can continue. I realized with a jolt one Tuesday afternoon in my cubicle that my family was just a poorly run company. Brielle was the error maker. Grant and Lydia were the corrupt board of directors who enabled her, and I was the error fixer. The cycle was relentless. Brielle would create a crisis. Maybe she quit a job without notice because her boss was toxic, which usually meant he expected her to show up on time. Maybe she got into a fender bender because she was texting. The crisis would happen. Brielle would call Lydia. Weeping, Lydia would panic, her heart rate spiking, her anxiety becoming the central weather system of the house. Grant would start shouting about how the world was unfair to his little girl. Then, they would call me. Madeline, your sister needs a ride. Madeline, can you look over Brielle's resume? Madeline, can you lend us $500? We are a little short this month because we helped Brielle with her car insurance. And I did it. I did it because I was trained to do it. I fixed the errors. I smoothed the road. I kept the Knight Family Corporation from declaring bankruptcy, both emotionally and financially. But while I was fixing their mistakes, I was also building my own exit strategy. I saved 50% of every paycheck. I worked overtime during the holidays when no one else wanted to be in the office. I took every bonus, every per diem, every unexpected windfall, and I funneled it into a high-yield savings account that my parents did not know existed. I bought the house on Maple Drive 3 years ago. It was the first thing in my life that was entirely mine. It was not a mansion, but to me, it felt like a castle. It had a wraparound porch where I could drink my coffee in silence. It had a small backyard with a mature oak tree that shaded the grass in the summer. It had a kitchen with quartz countertops that I picked out myself, running my fingers over the samples until I found the one that felt cold and solid and real. I remember the day I closed on the house. I sat on the floor of the empty living room and cried. I cried because I had done it without a single dollar from Grant or Lydia. I cried because I knew, with absolute certainty, that if I had asked them for help, they would have said no. I made a mistake, though. I invited them to the housewarming. I should have kept the house a secret, but a part of me, the part that was still a desperate little girl wanting approval, wanted to show them what I had done. I wanted them to see that their strong daughter had built something beautiful. They arrived 40 minutes late because Brielle had trouble deciding what to wear. When they walked in, they did not bring a gift. Brielle walked straight to the fridge and opened it, looking for a soda. Grant walked around the perimeter of the living room, tapping the walls as if checking for structural integrity. Lydia walked into the kitchen. She stood by the island, the one I had saved for 6 months to upgrade. She ran her hand over the smooth gray surface. She did not look at me. She looked at the expanse of the room, her eyes calculating. "It is a lot of space," she said. Her voice was light, but the words were heavy. 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths. It seems a little wasteful, for just one person. I felt the temperature in my chest drop. I wanted space. Mom, I work hard. Of course you do, she said, finally looking at me with a smile that did not reach her eyes. But Brielle is still in that studio apartment uptown. It is so cramped. She barely has room for her easel. Brielle is welcome to visit, I said, setting a hard boundary. Grant walked into the kitchen then. He looked at the high ceilings. He looked at the new appliances. He nodded, a look of satisfaction on his face that I misread as pride. "It is a good investment, Madeline," he said. He clapped a hand on my shoulder. It felt heavy. "Good equity. It is good to have an asset like this in the family." I froze. In the family. He did not say, "It is good that you have an asset." He said, "In the family." In that moment, standing in the kitchen I had paid for, under the lights I had installed, I saw the truth. They did not see this house as my home. They saw it as a new branch office of the Knight Corporation. They saw it as a resource. They saw a spare bedroom that could solve a rent problem. They saw a basement that could store Brielle's unsold art. They saw equity that could be borrowed against if the Sunshine needed a bailout that was too big for their checking account. I did not say anything that day. I served them iced tea. I listened to Brielle complain about her landlord. I let them leave with leftovers packed in my Tupperware. But that night, after they had gone, I changed the code on the garage door opener. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself that they would respect my boundaries because I was an adult and a homeowner. I was wrong. I was looking at the situation like a normal person, not like a risk analyst. A risk analyst would have seen that the control weakness was already exploited. They had the emotional keys to my guilt, and they assumed that gave them the physical keys to my front door. I continued to work at Northgate, taking on harder cases, traveling more. Every time I left town, my mother would call, "Are you going away again? The house will be empty." "Yes, Mom, it is locked and alarmed. It is just a shame," she would say. "A shame to have such a nice place sitting empty when family could be using it." She never finished the sentence, but she didn't have to. The implication was always there. "Brielle needs better. You have too much. You should share." They never understood that I didn't have too much. I had exactly what I had earned. Brielle didn't have too little. She had exactly what she had squandered. But in the Knight family ledger, my surplus was automatically designated to cover her deficit. 2 weeks before I sold the house, I got a promotion. The big one. The one that would require me to move my base of operations and travel 80% of the time. It was the dream I had been working toward since I was 22. My first thought when I got the offer was not celebration. My first thought was fear. I sat in my office at Northgate, the offer letter shaking in my hand, and I thought, if I move, who will pay Brielle's rent when she inevitably loses her job next month? Then a darker thought followed. If I am gone for weeks at a time, how long until I come home and find Brielle living in my guest room because Mom gave her a key to water the plants? I knew the answer. It would take less than a week. They would view my absence as a vacancy, and nature abhors a vacuum, but not as much as my family abhors seeing me have something solely for myself. That was the moment the decision was made. I could not just move. I could not just lock the door. I had to scorch the earth. I had to remove the asset from the portfolio. I did not sell the house because I needed the money. I sold the house because as long as I owned it, they would feel entitled to it. As long as 140 Maple Drive was in my name, Grant and Lydia would view it as a communal safety net for their golden child. I realized that to truly leave, I couldn't just walk out the door. I had to sell the door to someone else. Someone who wouldn't care about family duty. Someone who would call the police. Someone like Marissa Lane. I remember looking at the listing agreement on my desk. I picked up my pen. For the first time in my life, I wasn't fixing an error for them. I was correcting the systemic failure of my own life. I signed my name, and I felt the heavy, suffocating weight of being the strong one begin to crack. The meeting that changed the trajectory of my life took place in a glass-walled conference room on the 42nd floor of the Northgate Risk and Compliance headquarters. It was a Tuesday morning, 2 weeks before the incident at the airport. My director, a woman named Ellen, who wore silk scarves like armor, slid a thick packet of paper across the mahogany table toward me. She told me that the firm had secured the Chicago contract. It was a massive undertaking, restructuring the compliance framework for a logistics giant that had grown too fast for its own good. She told me that she wanted me to lead it. Ellen explained that the role required total immersion. I would need to relocate to Chicago for at least 18 months. The firm would cover my housing, my travel, and a per diem that was more than most people made in a week. She mentioned a salary increase of 40%. She talked about partnership tracks and equity shares. I sat there, listening to her outline a future that was brilliant and lucrative. And my first physical reaction was not excitement. It was nausea. My mind did not jump to the architecture of Chicago or the prestige of the position. It did not jump to the freedom of a new city. Instead, my brain instantly, reflexively, performed a calculation that had nothing to do with my career. I thought, if I am in Chicago, who is going to pay Brielle's rent when she gets fired next month, I thought. If I am not physically here to drive over and fix the boiler or calm her down, will Grant and Lydia expect me to fly back every weekend? The thought was so automatic, so ingrained, that I almost missed the horror of it. I was being offered the opportunity of a lifetime, and my primary concern was how my absence would inconvenience the parasites who had been feeding off my stability for a decade. That was my red flag. In my line of work, we look for risk indicators. We look for the small anomaly that suggests a catastrophic system failure is imminent. That thought my worry for my sister's rent over my own success was the anomaly. It was the realization that I was not just a daughter or a sister. I was a host organism. I thanked Ellen. I told her I would take the assignment. I signed the preliminary acceptance letter right there at the table. When I walked out of that conference room, I knew I had to do more than just move. If I kept the house on Maple Drive, moving to Chicago would change nothing. The house would sit there, a physical anchor dragging me back. I knew exactly what would happen if I left the house empty. Grant would say that it was dangerous to leave a property unsupervised. Lydia would say that Brielle needed a quiet place to find herself after her latest breakup. They would ask for the key just to check the mail or water the plants. Week 1. Brielle would sleep over because her apartment was noisy. Week 2. She would move a few boxes in because she was organizing. Month 1. She would be living there full-time, likely with a boyfriend I had never met. Month 2. Grant would tell me that since I was making so much money in Chicago, it was petty of me to ask Brielle for rent. I would be paying the mortgage on a house I could not enter, subsidized by my hard work, while my family played house in my living room. The house was not an asset. It was a vulnerability. It was the bridge the invading army would use to cross into my new life. I had to burn the bridge. I did not go home that evening. Instead, I drove to a coffee shop 3 towns over, a place where I was certain I would not run into anyone from my high school or my parents' church. I opened my laptop and searched for real estate agents who specialized in off-market transactions. I needed a ghost. I needed someone who could move a property without a for sale sign ever touching the front lawn. If a sign went up, the neighbors would talk. If the neighbors talked, Lydia would know before the sun went down. And if Lydia knew I was selling, the guilt trip would be nuclear. She would cry about how I was abandoning the family. Grant would demand to know why I wasn't selling it to Brielle for $1, or why I wasn't keeping it as a legacy. I found a broker named Sarah. She was sharp, discreet, and understood the concept of a high-conflict family dynamic without me having to explain the embarrassing details. I met her the next morning before work. I told her I wanted a quick close, cash preferred, and absolute silence until the deed was recorded. "I can do that," she said, "but it might affect the price." "I do not care about the top dollar," I told her. "I care about the exit." We priced it to move, and because the market in Raleigh was hungry, we had an offer within 48 hours. But while Sarah handled the paperwork, I had to handle the narrative. I needed a cover story that would explain why I was packing boxes but would not trigger their entitlement alarm until it was too late. I invited my parents and Brielle over for dinner on a Sunday. I made a roast chicken. I set the table. I poured the wine. I watched them eat my food, knowing it was the last time they would ever sit in this dining room. "I have some news," I said. Once Grant had finished his second helping, Lydia looked up, her eyes narrowing slightly. She had a sixth sense for changes in the status quo. "Is it about work?" "Yes," I said. "I am being transferred to Chicago for a long-term project. I leave in 2 weeks." "Chicago?" Brielle wrinkled her nose. "It is so cold there. Why would you go there?" "It is a promotion," I said, "and a significant raise." Grant nodded, doing the math in his head. "Good. Good for you. You will be able to help out more with the family vacation fund this year." I ignored that. I took a sip of water and delivered the lie I had rehearsed for 3 days. "The company has a very strict policy about relocation," I said. "Since they are paying for my housing in Chicago, they are taking over the management of this house. They are turning it into a corporate rental for other executives coming to the area." Lydia put her fork down. "What does that mean?" "It means the house is going into a corporate housing pool," I explained. "It will be managed by a firm. They handle everything: maintenance, security, occupancy. It is part of my contract." "So strangers will be living here?" Lydia asked. Her voice was tight. "In your house?" "It is a business arrangement, Mom." "That seems invasive," she said. "Why not just let family stay here? Brielle hates her apartment. It would be safer to have family watching the house than some stranger." There it was, the hook. She did not even blink. She did not congratulate me on the promotion. She immediately tried to pivot the situation to benefit Brielle. "I cannot do that," I said, keeping my voice level. "The contract is specific. The house has to be available for Northgate employees, and the insurance policy forbids anyone else from residing here. If I let family stay, I lose the housing stipend in Chicago. It would cost me thousands of dollars a month." I used money as the shield because I knew it was the only language Grant respected. If I said it was about boundaries, they would argue. If I said it was about money, they would back down. Grant would never advise me to lose money, even if it meant denying Brielle. "Well," Grant grunted, "that is a strict policy, but business is business." "Exactly," I said. "So, the management company is sending a crew to do a deep clean and change the locks in 2 weeks. I have to have everything out by then." I watched them digest this. They didn't like it. Lydia looked around the room, looking at the curtains she had helped me pick out, looking at the sofa. I could see her mentally calculating how she could work around this, and then I made the most calculated move of all. I knew my parents had a spare key. I had given it to them years ago for emergencies. A normal person, upon selling a house, would demand that key back. I did not ask for it. I knew that if I asked for the key, it would signal a finality that would make them suspicious. If I demanded the key, Lydia would ask why. She would say, "But what if there is a fire? What if the corporate people need help?" She would fight me for it. By leaving the key in their possession, I maintained the illusion that the house was still mine, and therefore, still theirs. I let them keep the key because I knew it would be the instrument of their own humiliation. I also did something else. I kept the emergency hide-a-key under the fake rock in the garden. I knew Brielle knew where it was. I left it there deliberately. It was a trap. I admit that. It was a passive trap, but a trap nonetheless. I was betting on their entitlement. I was betting that they would ignore my story about the corporate lease. I was betting that the moment I was on a plane, they would come over here, use their key, and walk right in, thinking they could talk their way out of it later. I wanted them to walk in. I wanted them to use the key, because I needed the new owners to see exactly who my family was. I needed a third-party witness to their boundary violation. I needed the law involved, and I couldn't be the one to call them. I met the buyers, Marissa and Caleb Lane. 4 days later, we met at the house for the final walkthrough. The house was empty now. My furniture was in storage or sold. The walls were bare. Marissa was heavily pregnant, her hand resting protectively on her stomach. Caleb was tall, soft-spoken, and looked at the house with a reverence that broke my heart a little. "We love the light in the kitchen," Marissa said, standing in the spot where Lydia had criticized my wasteful space. "I can see the baby's high chair right here." "It is a great kitchen," I said. Caleb looked at the backyard. "I am going to build a swing set under that oak tree," he said. "It is the main reason we made the offer. You do not find trees like that in the new developments." They were planning a future. They were talking about paint colors and nurseries and vegetable gardens. They were not talking about duty or obligation or guilt. They were talking about joy. I felt a sudden, fierce protectiveness over them. I was handing them a clean slate, but I knew I was also handing them a potential battlefield. "I need to tell you something," I said, "about the neighborhood." They looked at me, concerned. "The neighbors are great," I said, "but I have some difficult family members who live in the area. I have not told them I sold the house. They think I'm renting it out." Caleb frowned. "Is that going to be a problem?" "It should not be," I said, "but if anyone shows up here claiming to be my sister or my parents, you do not let them in. You do not talk to them. You call the police." I saw the look exchanged between them. It was the look people give you when they realize you come from a broken place. "We can handle it," Caleb said quietly. "It is our house now. We have the deed." "Yes," I said. "You do." The day of the closing, I sat in a lawyer's office downtown. I signed my name 30 times. With every signature, I felt a physical weight lifting off my shoulders. Madeline Knight, Madeline Knight, Madeline Knight. When I handed over the keys, my set, the garage remotes, the mailbox key, I felt a strange sensation in my fingertips. It was the absence of possession. "Congratulations," the title agent said. "The funds will be wired to your account by 5 o'clock. "Thank you," I said. I walked out to my car. I sat in the driver's seat and checked my bank account on my phone. The wire hadn't hit yet, but I knew it was coming. I had 3 days left before my flight. I spent them in a hotel near the airport. I did not tell my parents I had already moved out. I let them think I was still packing at the house. I let them think I was struggling with boxes. I ghosted the house before I ghosted the family. On the final morning, the morning of the flight, I sent a group text to the family chat. "Heading to the airport now. Love you all. We'll call when I settle in." It was the final piece of bait. I knew what they would do. They would wait a few hours. They would wait until they were sure I was in the air. And then, Brielle would drive over to Maple Drive. She would think she was being clever. She would think she was pulling a fast one on the strict corporate management company. She would think the house was empty, waiting for her to fill it with her noise. She had no idea that she was walking into a home that had already been claimed by a family that actually knew how to love each other. I sat in the airport lounge, the cold brew in my hand, and I waited for the inevitable. I knew the call would come. I knew the scream would come. And when it did, when Brielle shrieked that strangers were in her house, I didn't feel guilt. I felt the cold, hard satisfaction of a risk manager who had finally eliminated the threat. The house was gone, and with it, their power over me, or so I thought. I didn't realize then that selling the house was just the declaration of war. The actual battle was just beginning. For the first 14 days in Chicago, I experienced a sensation I can only describe as decompression. It was physical. My shoulders dropped 2 inches. The chronic tension headache that had lived behind my left eye for a decade simply evaporated. I was living in a corporate apartment in the Loop, 25 floors up, It was all glass and steel and impersonal gray leather furniture. It lacked the warmth of my house on Maple Drive, but it possessed something far more valuable. It was impenetrable. The doorman required a key card. The elevator required a fob. There was no spare key under a rock, and there was no sister who knew the code to the lobby. I threw myself into the new project. The client was a mess of regulatory violations, and fixing it was the kind of complex, intellectual puzzle that soothed my brain. I worked 12 hours a day. I ordered takeout. I slept in the middle of the bed. I foolishly thought I had executed the perfect escape. I had sold the asset, moved the target, and severed the immediate logistical ties. But in risk management, we have a term called tail risk. It is the probability of a rare event occurring at the extreme end of the distribution curve. My family was the tail risk, and while I was analyzing spreadsheets in Chicago, the catastrophe was brewing back in Raleigh. The timeline I am about to reconstruct comes from a combination of police reports, the discovery phase of the later legal proceedings, and the hysterical voicemails I received after the fact. It started, as it always did, with Brielle making a choice that was based on emotion rather than logic. For the past 6 months, Brielle had been living with a man named Tyler. Tyler was a DJ who was on the verge of breaking out. In reality, Tyler was 30 years old and sleeping on a mattress on the floor. Brielle had moved in with him after knowing him for 3 weeks, convinced that he was her soulmate. On the Tuesday morning of the incident, exactly 2 weeks after I closed on the house, Tyler decided he needed space to focus on his art. He broke up with Brielle via text message while she was at work. When she got back to their apartment, her bags were on the curb. This was the crisis point. This was the moment where a normal adult would check their savings account, book a hotel, or call a friend. Brielle called Lydia. She drove to my parents' house, weeping, her car filled with trash bags of clothes. She collapsed on their living room floor, performing the tragedy of the abandoned woman. Grant and Lydia did what they always did. They comforted her. They told her Tyler was a loser. They told her she was too good for him. But then came the logistical problem. My parents live in a 2-bedroom condo. They downsized 5 years ago. There is no guest room. There is barely enough room for Grant's recliner. They could not take her in. And so, the family court convened. I can picture them sitting at their small kitchen table. Lydia would have been wringing her hands. Grant would have been pacing. "We cannot have her sleeping on the couch," Lydia would say. "It is bad for her back. She is fragile right now. She needs stability." Grant would agree. "She needs a place to heal." And then, their eyes would have turned toward the mental image of 140 Maple Drive. To them, my house was sitting empty. In their minds, I was in Chicago, living on the company dime, leaving a perfectly good 3-bedroom home to gather dust. They remembered my lie about the corporate rental, but they filtered it through their own lens of entitlement. Madeline is not using it. Grant would reasoned, "It is a crime to let a family asset sit idle when Brielle is in crisis." But she said something about a management company. Lydia might have whispered, a faint echo of conscience, or perhaps just fear of authority. Nonsense. Grant would have waved his hand. "Madeline is just being dramatic. She is trying to hoard the house. Besides, who is going to know she's in Illinois? We move Brielle in for a few weeks. She gets back on her feet, and we move her out before Madeline ever comes back to check on the place." That was the logic. It was not malicious in their eyes. It was practical. It was efficient. Why pay for a hotel when our house was available? Then came the fatal sentence, the one Grant likely delivered with the absolute conviction of a patriarch who believes his word is law. "It is our property," he would have said. "Madeline is our daughter. What is hers is ours. Family helps family." They retrieved the key. They had kept it, just as I knew they would. It was probably in the junk drawer, next to the takeout menus and the dried-out pens. They didn't see the key as a tool for emergencies. They saw it as a permanent pass. It was their symbol of ownership over me. They loaded up Brielle's car. They probably added some groceries from their own pantry, a loaf of bread, some milk, the yogurt Brielle liked. They were not breaking and entering in their minds. They were moving their daughter into her temporary annex. They drove the 20 minutes to Maple Drive. I wonder what they talked about in the car. Did they feel any guilt? Did they worry about the alarm? No. I had told them the code years ago, and I doubt they thought I would change it. They relied on my consistency. They relied on Madeline the machine, who never changed her passwords and never changed her locks because she was too busy working. They pulled into the driveway. Here is where the reality should have hit them. There was a different car in the driveway, a silver SUV, but confirmation bias is a powerful drug. Grant likely looked at the SUV and said, "Oh, the management company must have someone checking the lawn." Or perhaps, maybe a neighbor parked there. They did not stop. They did not knock. They got out of the car. Brielle wiped her tears. Clutching a pillow she had brought from Tyler's apartment, Lydia carried a bag of groceries. Grant marched to the front door, the key in his hand. He inserted the key into the lock. It didn't turn. This was the first physical barrier. Marissa and Caleb had changed the locks the day they moved in, a standard security measure. Grant must have jiggled it. He must have pulled it out and tried again. He probably got frustrated, muttering about how cheap the lock was. "It is stuck." He would have grunted. "Try the garage," Lydia would have suggested. They went to the garage keypad. Grant punched in the code I had used for 5 years. The code was my birthday. Nothing happened. At this point, a rational person stops. A rational person realizes that the locks are changed and the codes are wiped, which means they are not welcome. But my family is not rational. They are relentless. She must have changed it for the corporate people. Grant would have said, "Angry now, ridiculous, locking her own parents out." And then, Brielle remembered. "The hide-a key," she said. "Under the rock near the porch." I had left it there. The old brass key, hidden under a fake gray stone that looked nothing like the real stones around it. I had left it there specifically for this moment, though I had prayed it would never come. Brielle ran to the garden. She flipped the rock. She found the key. Got it. She cheered. It was a victory for them. They had outsmarted the system. They had bypassed the obstacles. They felt clever. They felt authorized. Grant took the key. He walked back to the front door. He slid it in. It turned. I had not given Marissa that specific key because I had lost it years ago. I had forgotten to tell her to rekey that specific cylinder if it was mastered differently. Or perhaps the previous owner had keyed them all alike, and I simply left the spare that matched the old set. No, that's not right. Let me correct the technicality. Because in my line of work, details matter. Marissa had changed the deadbolt, but the handle lock, the bottom lock, she hadn't gotten around to yet. She and Caleb were doing the work themselves. They had done the deadbolt on Saturday. They were going to do the handle lock the following weekend. Grant turned the handle lock. The door opened. They stepped inside, ready to claim their territory. Home sweet home. Brielle probably sighed. Stepping onto the foyer mat, but the mat was wrong. My mat was a generic brown choir mat. This one was blue with lemons on it, and the smell was wrong. My house always smelled of vanilla and cleaning supplies. This house smelled of fresh paint and sawdust. They walked into the living room, and there, the world broke. My beige walls were gone. They were painted a soft, warm sage green. My gray sectional sofa was gone. In its place was a cream-colored armchair and a stack of moving boxes. And standing in the middle of the room, holding a roll of painter's tape, was Marissa Lane. She was wearing overalls. Her hair was in a messy bun. She looked up, startled, her hand instinctively going to her pregnant belly. For 3 seconds, there was absolute silence. Then Brielle screamed. It was a scream of pure, unadulterated shock. She dropped her pillow. "Who are you?" Brielle shrieked. "What are you doing in my sister's house, Marissa?" To her credit, did not faint. She did not run. She stood her ground. "Who are you?" Marissa countered, her voice trembling but loud. "How did you get in here?" "We have a key," Grant boomed. He stepped in front of Brielle, puffing out his chest. He went into full intimidation mode. He saw a young woman, alone, and he assumed he could bully her into submission. "I am Grant Knight. This is my daughter's house. You are trespassing. I live here," Marissa shouted. "My husband and I bought this house." "Bought?" Lydia laughed. It was a nervous, high-pitched sound. Don't be silly. Madeline didn't sell the house. She is renting it. You must be the tenant. But there is a mistake. We need the house. You need to leave. The arrogance of it. You need to leave. As if Marissa was a squatter in her own home. Get out, Brielle yelled, stomping her foot like a toddler. My mom said I could stay here. Get out of my living room. Marissa backed up, reaching for her phone. I am calling the police, she said. Go ahead. Grant challenged her. Call them. Tell them you are harassing the owners. I will have you evicted by tonight. He truly believed it. He was so deep in the delusion that he thought the police would side with him. He thought his authority as the father superseded a deed. Marissa dialed 911. While she was on the phone, Caleb came in from the backyard. He had been sanding the deck. He was covered in dust. He saw 3 strangers screaming at his pregnant wife. Caleb is not a loud man, but he is a large man. He stepped between Grant and Marissa. Back away from my wife, Caleb said. His voice was low and dangerous. This is our property, Grant yelled, waving the key. Look, I have the key. I don't care what you have, Caleb said. Get out. The neighbors, Mrs. Gable and her husband, were walking their dog. They heard the shouting. They saw the open door. They saw the confrontation spilling onto the porch. They called the police, too. Brielle, realizing that the tenant was not backing down, and seeing the large, angry husband, began to panic. The reality was cracking. The green walls were real. The new furniture was real. The man defending his wife was real. She pulled out her phone. She needed the fixer. She needed the person who made reality bend to their will. She dialed my number. Madeline. She sobbed when the voicemail picked up the first time. Madeline. Pick up, she called again, and again. And that is where we find ourselves. I was sitting in Charlotte, I was in the airport lounge in my memory. But physically I was in Chicago when I recounted this. But let's go back to the moment the call connected. I picked up the phone in the airport lounge because in the narrative, I am recounting the flashback of how they got there. But the call brings us back to the present moment of the hook. The circle was complete. They had driven 2 weeks of entitlement into a brick wall of legal reality. Brielle was screaming, Grant was blustering, Lydia was gasping for air, and Marissa Lane was holding the line. I could hear the siren in the background through the phone. It was getting louder. They are calling the police, Brielle screamed, and miles away, sitting in my blazer with my cold brew, I felt the final click of the lock. Not the lock on the door, but the lock on the trap I had set. I know. I thought. I was counting on it. Who is there? I asked, my voice calm, contrasting perfectly with the chaos on the other end. The accident had finally happened. But it wasn't an accident. It was the inevitable result of a lifetime of ignoring stop signs. And this time, I wasn't going to pay the ticket. The digital file transfer bar on my laptop screen filled with a satisfying shade of green. Sent. In the world of risk compliance, there's a saying we use often. If it is not documented, it did not happen. Conversely, if it is documented, signed, notarized, and recorded with the county clerk, then it is the only reality that matters. Emotions, memories, and familial expectations are just vapor. The PDF I had just sent to Marissa Lane was concrete. It was a 50-page weapon. I brought the phone back to my ear. I had Marissa on speaker, and through her device, I could hear the heavy, static-filled radio chatter that signals the arrival of law enforcement. Officers are here, Marissa said. Her voice was no longer trembling. It had hardened into the flat, steely tone of a woman defending her nest. Show them the email immediately, I instructed. Do not engage with my father. Do not answer my sister. Speak only to the badge. Understood, she said. I heard the heavy tread of boots on hardwood floors. I heard the rustle of synthetic fabric. A deep, authoritative voice cut through the background noise of Brielle's sobbing. All right, folks, let us lower the volume, the officer said. I am Officer Miller. I have got a call about a disturbance and a potential break-in. Who called it in? I did, Marissa said. My name is Marissa Lane. My husband Caleb and I own this home." "Liar," Brielle shrieked. "She is lying. She is a squatter." "Ma'am, step back." Officer Miller's voice was sharp. "I need everyone to stay calm. You, sir." He presumably pointed at Grant. "Hands out of your pockets." I visualized the scene. Grant, who was used to being the most important man in the room, was suddenly being treated like a suspect. He would be turning that shade of purple that usually preceded a lecture. "Officer," Grant blustered, trying to summon his respectable citizen voice, "there has been a misunderstanding. I am Grant Knight. My daughter owns this house. We are simply moving her sister in." "These people walked in off the street and started harassing us." "Your daughter?" the officer asked. "Madeline Knight," Grant said. "She lets us use the property. We have a key." "Officer," Marissa interrupted, "I have the closing documents on my phone right here. We purchased the home from Madeline Knight 2 weeks ago. The sale was recorded on the 13th. There was a pause. The kind of pause where a worldview is dismantled. I could hear the officer moving. "Let me see that," Officer Miller said. I held my breath in the airport terminal. This was the pivot point. This was the moment where the he said, she said dynamic died, and the legal facts took over. "Here is the deed," Marissa explained, her voice clear. "Here is the settlement statement, and I have the seller, Madeline Knight, on the phone right now." "Put her on," the officer said. "Madeline," Marissa said. "I am here," I said. My voice was projected into the room. "Officer Miller, my name is Madeline Knight. I am currently at Charlotte Douglas International Airport. I can confirm that I sold the property at 140 Maple Drive to Marissa and Caleb Lane. I signed the final paperwork 14 days ago. I surrendered all rights to the property at that time." "Madeline," Brielle wailed, "you promised. You said corporate housing." "Officer," I continued, ignoring her. "The individuals currently inside the home, Grant Knight, Lydia Knight, and Brielle Knight, do not have a lease. They do not have my permission to be there. Nor do they have the permission of the current owners. They are trespassing." "I have a key," Brielle screamed. It was her only defense, a talisman she thought granted her immunity. "Look, it fits the door if I wasn't supposed to be here. Why would I have a key?" "Ma'am," Officer Miller said, his tone shifting from investigative to enforcement. "Possession of a key does not equal ownership. If I find a key to the bank on the sidewalk, that does not mean I can walk in and open the vault." "But she gave it to us," Grant argued. "It is a family home." "It was a private asset," I corrected him, my voice cutting through the speaker. "And that key was a spare I gave you 5 years ago for emergencies. It was never intended to be used after the transfer of title. Using it today was unauthorized entry." I heard the rustling of papers. The officer was scrolling through the PDF. "This looks in order," Officer Miller said. "Warranty deed, recorded with the county. Mr. and Mrs. Lane are the legal owners." He turned his attention to my family. "Mr. Knight, you and your family need to vacate the premises immediately." "This is ridiculous," Lydia spoke up for the first time. Her voice was trembling, employing the tactic she always used when Grant's aggression failed pity. "Officer, please, my daughter Brielle, she has had a terrible day. Her boyfriend threw her out. She has nowhere to go. We just need a place for her to sleep. Surely you can't kick a young girl out on the street." "We are not kicking her out," Caleb spoke up. His voice was deep and rumbling. "We are asking her to leave our house. Just for a few nights," Lydia pleaded. She was bargaining. "Just until we sort this out. Madeline is being unreasonable, but we can work it out. Look, she is already here. Her boxes are inside." It was a classic Lydia move. Create a situation that is inconvenient to reverse, and bank on the other person's politeness to let it stand. She was weaponizing social awkwardness. "No," Marissa said instantly. "Absolutely not." "Ma'am," Officer Miller said to Lydia, "the homeowners have refused. You have to leave." "But I have rights," Brielle shouted. She had clearly watched too many courtroom dramas on television. "I have established residency. My stuff is here." "You have been here for 20 minutes," Officer Miller deadpanned. You have no mail here. You have no utility bills here. You have no lease. You are not a tenant. You are an intruder. Now, I am going to ask you one more time to collect your personal belongings and exit the dwelling, or I will be forced to place you under arrest for criminal trespassing. The word arrest hung in the air. Grant Knight does not get arrested. He is a man who plays golf. He is a man who serves on the vestry at church. The threat of handcuffs did what logic could not. It broke his resolve. Fine, Grant spat. Fine. If you want to treat your own flesh and blood like criminals, Madeline, then fine. I am treating you like adults who broke into a house, I said. Where is she supposed to go? Lydia cried. Our condo is too small. You know that. I closed my eyes. This was the final trap. If I let them leave with Brielle having nowhere to go, I would be the villain forever. I would be the sister who made Brielle homeless. They would rewrite the history to make me a monster. I needed to neutralize the narrative. I needed to perform one last act of support that was actually a severance package. I have just booked a room at the Holiday Inn Express on Highway 70, I said. I had been doing it on my phone while the officer was reading the deed. It is paid for 2 nights. The confirmation number is in your email. Mom. A hotel. Lydia sounded insulted. You are putting your sister in a hotel. It is a roof, I said. It is a bed, and it is more than you have provided for her today. I will not go to a hotel, Brielle screamed. I want my house. It is not your house, Officer Miller barked. He was losing patience. Let's go. Grab the bags. Now. I heard the sounds of shuffling. I heard the scrape of boxes being dragged across the floor, Marissa's beautiful, newly refinished floor. I hoped they hadn't scratched it. You will hear from me, Madeline, Grant said. He was close to the phone now. You have humiliated this family. You humiliated yourselves, I said. I just turned on the lights. Get out, Caleb said. I heard the front door open. I heard the heavy footsteps of my father, the lighter, frantic steps of my mother, and the dragging, reluctant shuffle of Brielle. Do not come back, Marissa called out after them. If I see any of you on this property again, I will file for a restraining order. We have a video doorbell. We will know. And give me the key, Officer Miller ordered. There was a clinking sound, the key hitting a palm. Thank you, Marissa said. The door slammed shut. The silence that followed was electric. Are they gone? I asked. They are in the driveway, Caleb said. He sounded exhausted. The officer is waiting until they drive off. I am so sorry, I said. Marissa, Caleb, I am so incredibly sorry. It is not your fault, Marissa said, though her voice was shaky. But Madeline, that was intense. Your sister, she really believed it was her house. She has never been told no in her life, I said. Today was the first time. We are changing the handle lock within the hour, Caleb said. And I'm installing deadbolts on the garage door. Good, I said. Send me the bill. I will pay for the locksmith. I will pay for the cleaning. I will pay for everything. You do not have to do that, Marissa said. I do, I said. It is part of the cleanup. Madeline, Marissa asked, her voice quiet. Are you okay? You sound very detached. I am boarding a plane, I said. I am going to Chicago. I am fine. Okay, she said. We will email you the police report number when we get it. Thank you. Goodbye. I hung up. I sat there in the terminal for a long moment. My hand was cramping from how hard I had been gripping the phone. I checked my email. The reservation confirmation for the Holiday Inn was there. $280 for 2 nights. It was a cheap price to pay for my freedom. I stood up. My boarding group was being called. I walked toward the gate, my phone already buzzing again. From Mom. How could you? She is sobbing in the car. From Grant. You are dead to me. From Brielle. I hate you. I looked at the messages. They were predictable. They were the desperate thrashing of an organism that had just been cut off from its food source. I selected all 3 threads. I hit block. Then I scanned my boarding pass and walked down the jet bridge. The legal battle was over. The house was secure. But as I found my seat in 2A and buckled my seatbelt, I knew that the real war, the war for my reputation and my sanity, was just beginning. Grant Knight did not lose gracefully. He would not accept that he was a trespasser. He would need to make himself the victim, and to do that, he would have to destroy me. I ordered a gin and tonic before the plane even took off. I had a feeling I was going to need it. 3 hours after I landed in Chicago, I sat at the glass desk in my temporary apartment on the 25th floor. The city lights were a grid of amber and white below me, a vast, organized system of electricity that made sense. I liked things that made sense. I placed my phone on the desk stand. I opened my laptop. I had a glass of water to my right, untouched. I logged into the video conferencing platform Northgate used for high-stakes negotiations. Then, with a deliberate movement of my index finger, I went into my phone settings and unblocked 3 numbers. I sent a single text to the group thread. Video call, 5 minutes, one time only, click the link. I knew they would join. Curiosity and rage are the 2 most powerful motivators in the human psyche, and my family was currently running on a high-octane blend of both. They needed to vent. They needed to scream. They needed to force me back into the box they had built for me, the box labeled Dutiful Daughter. At exactly 8 o'clock, the screen flickered, the connection stabilized, and the image that filled my monitor was a masterpiece of dysfunction. They were crowded together on the edge of a bed in the Holiday Inn Express room I had paid for. The lighting was that sickly, fluorescent yellow typical of roadside hotels. The headboard behind them was a depressing faux cherry wood. They sat like a self-appointed jury that had been forced to convene in a closet. Grant sat in the middle, his face flushed a dangerous shade of crimson. Lydia was on his left, clutching a tissue, her eyes red-rimmed and tragic. Brielle was on his right, wrapped in the hotel duvet, looking like a refugee from a war she had started. I did not say hello. I simply looked at them. I let the silence stretch. In negotiations, the person who speaks first loses leverage. Grant cracked first. "You are a vicious, cold-hearted woman," he snarled. His voice distorted slightly over the microphone, but the venom was clear. "You set a trap for your own sister. You lured her in." "I did not lure anyone," I said. My voice was calm, the voice I used when explaining a compliance violation to a CEO. "I moved to a new city. I sold a property I owned. You broke into it." "You knew," Grant shouted. He leaned forward, his face filling the frame. "You knew we would use the key. You left it there on purpose. You wanted to humiliate us. You wanted the police to come." "I wanted to see if you respected my boundaries," I corrected him. "I left the key where it always was. A respectful family would have called me and asked, 'Madeline, may we use the house?' If you had called, I would have told you it was sold. But you did not call. You assumed, you took, you trespassed." "It was a misunderstanding," Lydia cried out. She leaned across Grant, her face contorted with the specific agony of a mother whose worldview is collapsing. "We thought it was corporate housing. We thought you were just renting it out. How could you let strangers call the police on your baby sister?" "Brielle is 29 years old," I said. "She is not a baby, and she is not a victim. She is a woman who entered a home that did not belong to her and refused to leave when the owners asked her to." "I had nowhere to go," Brielle screamed from the side. She threw the duvet off her shoulders. "Tyler kicked me out. I was on the street. Madeline, the street, and you are worried about paperwork." "I am worried about the law," I said. "And I am worried about the fact that you think your personal crisis gives you the right to commandeer other people's assets." "Assets," Grant spat the word like it was a curse. "That is all you care about. Money, assets, deeds. What about family? What about blood? We drove over there to help her, and you had us treated like common criminals." "You were treated like criminals because you committed a crime," I said. "Entering a property without permission is criminal trespassing." "We had a key." Grant slammed his hand on the hotel nightstand. The lamp shook. "You had a stolen key," I said. You retained a key I asked you to return 5 years ago. You used it to access a property after the title had transferred. That is not access, Dad. That is burglary. Don't you dare call your father a burglar, Lydia hissed. We raised you. We sacrificed for you. And this is how you repay us, by making us stand in a driveway while the neighbors watched the Gables were watching. Madeline, Mrs. Gable saw everything. Do you know what this does to our reputation? There it was, the core of the issue. It wasn't about Brielle's safety. It wasn't about housing. It was about the optics. It was about the fact that the Knight family, pillars of the community, had been exposed as chaotic and boundaryless. Your reputation is the result of your actions, I said. If you do not want to be seen being evicted by the police, do not break into houses. You are enjoying this, Brielle said. Her voice was smaller now, filled with a petty, childish hate. You are sitting there in your fancy apartment, looking down on us. You think you are better than us. I think I am solvent, I said. I think I am independent, and I think I am tired. I looked down at my keyboard. I had prepared a document before the call. It was a simple PDF invoice. I had compiled the costs incurred by their afternoon adventure. I have just sent an email to all of you, I said. Open it. I am not opening anything from you, Grant said. You should, I said. It is a bill. Lydia looked down at her phone. She tapped the screen. Her eyes widened. Madeline, she gasped. What is this? It is an invoice, I explained. Let me walk you through the line items. Item 1. Emergency locksmith services. Because you used a key to bypass the lock, the new owners had to pay an emergency rate to have the entire house rekeyed on a Sunday evening. That is $350. I am not paying that, Grant said. Item 2, I continued, ignoring him. Professional cleaning service. Marissa Lane is pregnant. She was distressed. Her husband hired a crew to sanitize the house because strangers had been inside touching their surfaces. That is $200. We are not dirty, Brielle shouted. Item 3, I said. Hotel accommodation at the Holiday Inn Express. 2 nights, $280. Total due, $830. You are charging us for the hotel you put us in, Lydia asked, her voice trembling with disbelief. I thought you were helping us. I was mitigating a disaster, I said. I paid for it up front, so you would not sleep in your car. But make no mistake, that was a loan. It was not a gift. You caused the displacement. You bear the cost. Grant stood up. He paced the small length of the hotel room, disappearing off-screen and then reappearing. He was shaking with rage. You have lost your mind, he said. You have become a cold, calculating machine. You think you can bill your family like we are clients? We are not paying this, not a dime. Then I will deduct it, I said. Deduct it from what? Grant challenged. We do not owe you anything. You will deduct it from the imaginary balance you think I owe you, I said. From the family duty account. Consider this debt settled. But hear me clearly, I am not paying it. I am not absorbing it. This is the cost of your entitlement. Grant moved close to the camera again. His face was pixelated, his eyes dark. You have destroyed this family's honor, he said. You have shamed us. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had taught me to save money while he bought my sister cars. I looked at the man who had preached responsibility while enabling a 30-year-old toddler. Honor does not exist if you have to steal a key to keep it, I said. The words came out cold and hard, like ice cubes hitting a glass. There is no honor in what you did today. There is only desperation. We were trying to survive, Lydia cried. We were trying to keep the family together. No, I said. You were trying to keep the system running. You were trying to keep me as the safety net, so you didn't have to be the parents. You wanted Brielle to live in my house so you wouldn't have to deal with her in your condo. You wanted me to pay for her life so you could keep your retirement intact. That is not family. Mom, that is parasitism. How dare you? Lydia whispered. I am done, I said. I am done being the fixer. I am done being the bank. I am done being the resource you mine whenever Brielle creates a crater in her life. I took a breath. This was the part I had rehearsed in the mirror. From this moment forward, I said, enunciating every syllable, I am no longer your backup plan. I am no longer your emergency contact. Do not put my name on a lease. Do not put my name on a hospital admission form. Do not put my name on a loan application. You can't do that, Brielle said. You are my sister. I was your sister, I said. Today, I was your victim, and I am choosing not to be one anymore. If you walk away now, Grant threatened, pointing a finger at the lens, do not expect to be welcomed back for Christmas. Do not expect to be part of this family. I sold the house, Dad, I said. I literally sold the venue where we play this game. I am not coming back for Christmas. I am staying in Chicago. You will be alone, Lydia said. It was a curse, designed to trigger my deepest fear. You will be all alone in that big city. I would rather be alone in a city of strangers than used in a house full of family, I said. I looked at the time. The 5 minutes were up. One final thing, I said, and this is a legal notification, not a daughterly request. Marissa and Caleb Lane are good people. They have the deed. They have the law on their side. If you go back to that house, if you drive by, if you put a single letter in their mailbox, they will file for a restraining order. We wouldn't, Lydia started. If they file for a restraining order, I cut her off. I will testify on their behalf. I will send them every email, every text, and the recording of this video call to prove a pattern of harassment. I will help them build a case that will put you in front of a judge who will not care about your reputation. Grant went pale. The threat of a public courtroom was his kryptonite. You would testify against your father? He asked. I would testify for the truth, I said. I have no daughter, Grant said. He turned his back to the camera. And I have no house for you to break into, I replied. I reached for the mouse. Goodbye, I said. I clicked the red button before they could respond. The image of the sad, yellow hotel room vanished. My screen returned to the calm, neutral desktop background of my company logo. I sat there for a minute in the silence of my apartment. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic rhythm that contradicted my calm voice. My hands were shaking slightly. I picked up my phone. I went to the group chat. I deleted it. I went to their contacts. Grant Knight, blocked. Lydia Knight, blocked. Brielle Knight, blocked. I scrolled through my phone, looking for the other numbers. Cousins, aunts, the extended network of flying monkeys who would inevitably be recruited to guilt me back into the fold. I blocked them too. I blocked my Aunt Carol, who always told me to be the bigger person. I blocked my cousin Mike, who borrowed money from everyone. I scrubbed the contact list until the only names left were colleagues, my dentist, and my few actual friends, people who liked me for me, not for what I could provide. Then, I did one more thing. I opened the settings for my email. I created a rule. Any email containing the words Knight, Mom, Dad, or Brielle would automatically bypass my inbox and go into a folder I named Litigation Hold. I would not see them. I would not read them. They would simply be archived, silent evidence gathering dust until the day I might need to use it. I stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. I looked out at Chicago. It was a city of millions of people, and not a single one of them had a key to my apartment. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't happiness. Happiness is light and bubbly. This was heavier. It was relief. It was the feeling of setting down a backpack you have been carrying for 20 years. A backpack filled with rocks that someone else put there. I was alone, and for the first time in my life, that didn't feel like a punishment. It felt like a promotion. But I knew the silence wouldn't last. I knew my family. They were like water. They would try to find a crack. They would try to seep back in. And if they couldn't get to me, they would try to destroy the person who had replaced me in their narrative, Marissa Lane. I had warned them, but Grant Knight never listened to warnings. He only listened to consequences. and I had a feeling the consequences were just getting started. The silence from my family lasted exactly 72 hours. I had mistaken it for surrender, or perhaps shame. I should have known better. In my world, silence is not always an end to hostilities. Often, it is simply the reload time. I was sitting in my new office in Chicago, a corner suite with a view of the lake that cost the firm more in rent per month than my father made in a quarter. I was feeling good. I was feeling invincible. I had successfully navigated the onboarding process for the new project, a massive compliance overhaul for a logistics conglomerate called Apex Distribution. I had my team in place. I had my strategy mapped out. Then, an email landed in my inbox. It was not from my mother. It was not from a lawyer. It was from the senior managing partner of Northgate, a man named Robert Sterling, who rarely emailed anyone below the executive suite unless they were being fired or promoted. The subject line was 2 words, urgent discussion. The body of the email was equally sparse. Please come to my office immediately. We need to discuss a conflict of interest regarding the Apex account. My stomach dropped. In risk management, conflict of interest is a phrase that kills careers. It implies unethical behavior. It implies hidden agendas. I stood up, smoothing my skirt, running a mental diagnostic of my last 6 months. Had I traded stock? No. Did I know anyone on the Apex board? No. I walked to the elevator and rode up to the 45th floor. The air up there was thinner, colder. I walked into Robert's office. He was standing by the window. Ellen, my direct supervisor, was sitting on the sofa. She looked pale. She looked at me with a mixture of pity and frustration that terrified me more than anger would have. "Sit down, Madeline," Robert said. He did not smile. I sat. "Robert, Ellen, what is going on? I have reviewed the compliance protocols for Apex. Everything is clean." "The protocols are fine," Robert said. He turned to face me. "The problem is the personnel. Specifically, the Chief Financial Officer of Apex Distribution." "I have not met him yet," I said. "We are scheduled to have our introductory briefing on Thursday." "You have not met him professionally," Robert corrected. "But I believe you know him personally. Or rather, your family does." He slid a piece of paper across the desk. It was an organizational chart for Apex. Circled in red marker was the name of the CFO, Caleb Lane. I stared at the name. The letters seemed to swim on the page. Caleb, Marissa's husband, the quiet, large man who wanted to build a swing set under the oak tree. I had sold my house to the CFO of the company I was hired to audit. The statistical probability of this happening was microscopic. Raleigh is a big area. There are thousands of buyers. But then I remembered I had sold off-market. I had sold to a corporate transfer. Caleb must have been moving to Raleigh to take a regional position with Apex. Or perhaps he was working remotely for the Chicago HQ. It didn't matter how it happened. It mattered that it happened. "Oh God," I whispered. "We received a call this morning," Robert said. His voice clipped. "From Mr. Lane's legal counsel. They wanted to know why the lead consultant for Northgate Risk, a woman hired to evaluate their security protocols, is related to the people who broke into their CFO's private residence 3 days ago." The room spun. "Robert, I can explain," I started. "Mr. Lane is rightfully disturbed," Ellen interjected, her voice tight. "He is asking questions about judgment. Madeline, he is asking how we can trust you to manage sensitive corporate data when you apparently cannot manage your own family boundaries. The rumor circulating in their C-suite is that this was some kind of intimidation tactic, or worse, a mental health issue." "It was not intimidation," I said, my voice rising. "It was a real estate transaction. I sold him the house. My family acted without my consent. I called the police on them myself. I am the one who evicted them." "That is not the story being told," Robert said. "The story being told is that the Knight family breached the security of a C-level executive, and since your name is on the deed that was just transferred, and your name is on our letterhead, the two are inextricably linked." He leaned forward, placing his hands on the desk. "This is a reputation business. Madeline, we sell trust. Right now, you look like a liability, If Apex pulls this contract because they are uncomfortable with you, that is a loss of $2 million in billable hours this year alone. I felt the cold, hard reality of the corporate world pressing down on me. They didn't care about my trauma. They didn't care about Brielle's entitlement or Grant's narcissism. They cared about the bottom line. "What do you need me to do?" I asked. "We need to know if this is going to continue." Robert said, "Mr. Lane indicated that your father threatened him. He said something about destroying reputations. Is your father going to show up at the Apex offices? Is your sister going to harass Mr. Lane's pregnant wife?" "I have blocked them," I said. "I have cut contact. Blocking them on your phone is not a strategy," Robert said. "It is an avoidance tactic. We need assurance that this is finished. If there is one more incident, one phone call, one letter, one drive-by, we will have to remove you from the project. And frankly, if we remove you for cause, your future at Northgate is limited." I walked out of that office 10 minutes later with my career hanging by a thread. I went back to my desk. I was shaking. Not from fear, but from a rage so pure it felt like clarity. My father, in his desperate attempt to cling to control, had not just embarrassed me, he had planted a bomb in the foundation of my livelihood. He had threatened Caleb Lane, a man with the power to fire me because his ego was bruised. I realized then that I had a choice. I could play the dutiful daughter. I could call Caleb and beg for forgiveness. I could say, "My father is old. He didn't mean it. Please don't be mad." I could take the blame. I could absorb the risk exposure to save Grant's face. But if I did that, I would be confirming to Northgate that I was weak. I would be confirming to Caleb that I was complicit. And I would be teaching my parents that no matter what they did, even risking my job, I would smooth it over. If I took the fall, I would burn. I picked up my phone. I did not call my parents. I did not call a lawyer. I called the number I had saved for Marissa Lane. She answered on the second ring. "Hello?" Her voice was guarded. She checked the caller ID. "Marissa, it is Madeline," I said. "Please do not hang up. I am not calling to harass you. I am calling because I just walked out of a meeting with the senior partners at Northgate." There was a pause. "Madeline," she said, her tone softening slightly but still wary. "Caleb is very upset. He had to file an incident report with his company security team. It is protocol when an executive has a home intrusion." "I know," I said. "He is the CFO of Apex. That is my client. Marissa." "Oh," she said. The word was small. She connected the dots. "Oh, no." "Yes," I said. "My bosses are questioning my stability. They are questioning whether I can be trusted." "I am so sorry," Marissa said. "Caleb didn't know well. He knew you worked in compliance, but he didn't realize it was his compliance team until this morning when he saw the vendor list. He just wanted to document the threat." "I understand why he did it," I said. "He was protecting his family. I respect that. But now I need to protect mine. I mean, my career, not my relatives." I took a deep breath. "Marissa, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Did my father threaten Caleb personally?" "Yes," she said. "When they were in the driveway, before the police let them go, your father rolled down the window and told Caleb that he did not know who he was messing with and that he would ruin him in this town. It was ugly. Madeline." "Okay," I said. "Marissa, I am going to send you a file. It is not an apology letter. It is evidence. Evidence. I am going to send you the full timeline," I said. "I am going to send you the emails where I told my family the house was a corporate rental, proving they knew they had no rights to it. I am going to send you the text messages where I explicitly told them I was selling. I am going to send you the footage from my security cameras from 3 months ago where I asked my father to return the key and he claimed he lost it." "Why are you giving me this?" she asked. "Because I need Caleb to show this to his security team." I said, "I need him to see, and I need my bosses to see, that this was not a Knight family action. This was a hostile action taken by Grant and Lydia Knight against Madeline Knight and the Lane family. I am not their accomplice. Marissa, I am their target. Just like you. You would do that, she asked. You would hand over evidence that could get your parents charged with, I don't know, harassment stalking. If that is what it takes to stop them, I said, yes, I need to clear my name. I cannot let them sink my career because they refuse to follow the law. I believe you, Marissa said, and honestly, I don't think they are going to stop. Your sister, she drove by the house this morning. My blood ran cold. What? She didn't stop, Marissa said, but I saw her car, the red sedan. She drove by slow. She stared at the house. It creeped me out. Madeline, I am here alone during the day. She is scouting, I said. The risk analyst in me took over. She is looking for a vulnerability. She thinks if she annoys you enough, you will give up. I am not giving up, Marissa said firmly. We love this house. Good, I said. Then let's lock it down. I am compiling the dossier now. I will have it to you within the hour. Tell Caleb to show it to Robert Sterling. Tell him to show it to everyone. I have nothing to hide. Thank you, Madeline, she said. I will tell him. I hung up the phone. I opened a new folder on my secure drive. I named it Knight Defense Exhibit A. I started pulling the data. I worked with the precision of a forensic accountant. Exhibit 1. The email dated 3 weeks ago. Subject house status. Content. The house is being turned over to corporate management. No family access is permitted. Exhibit 2. The text thread from the day of the closing. Me keys handed over. House is sold. Mom. That is a shame. Exhibit 3. The voicemail. Brielle left me 2 months ago. I need money. Maddie, you have to help me. You owe me. Exhibit 4. The ring camera footage from Christmas. Grant standing on my porch, holding the key I had asked for. Me dad. Give me the key. Grant. Stop nagging. I forgot it at home. Proving he lied about losing it. Proving he retained it with intent. I built the timeline. I annotated the screenshots. I created a narrative that was undeniable. It showed a pattern of financial abuse, emotional manipulation, and premeditated boundary violation. It was not a family album. It was a criminal profile. When I was finished, the file was 40 pages long. It was thorough. It was damning. It was the kind of document that, once seen, could not be unseen. It painted my parents not as loving elders, but as potential liabilities to any secure organization. I attached the file to an email addressed to Caleb Lane, copying Marissa Lane and blind copying Robert Sterling and legal counsel at Northgate. I wrote a simple message in the body, Mr. Lane, please find attached a comprehensive timeline and evidentiary support regarding the unauthorized entry at 140 Maple Drive. This document confirms that the actions taken by Grant, Lydia, and Brielle Knight were performed without my knowledge, consent, or approval. It documents a history of attempted unauthorized access and establishes that I have taken all necessary legal and personal steps to sever ties with these individuals, to protect the integrity of the property and my professional standing. I am prepared to testify to the authenticity of these documents in any legal proceeding you deem necessary to ensure the safety of your family. Sincerely, Madeline Knight. I hovered over the send button. I knew what this meant. This was the nuclear option. Sending this to my boss and to the client was a declaration that my family was a threat. It was an act of betrayal against the blood is thicker than water creed. But looking at the screen, I remembered Brielle driving slowly past the house where a pregnant woman lived. I remembered Grant threatening a man's reputation because he couldn't get his way. They weren't just messy, they were dangerous, and they were counting on my silence to provide them with cover. I clicked send. The email whooshed away. I sat back in my chair. I felt a strange vibration in my hands. It was adrenaline. I had just exposed my family to the full scrutiny of a billion-dollar corporation's legal department. I had stripped them of their favorite weapon, my protection. Now, they were out in the open. And they had no idea that the judgment they had questioned in me was the very thing that was about to dismantle them. I was good at my job. I was very, very good at identifying risks, and for the first time, I had correctly identified the source of the risk, and I had initiated the mitigation protocol. I went back to work on the Apex compliance file. I had a job to keep, and I intended to keep it, even if I had to prosecute my own DNA to do it. The dossier I sent to Northgate and Apex must have been effective, because I kept my job. Robert Sterling called me into his office the next morning, looked me in the eye, and told me that after reviewing the evidence, the firm was satisfied that I was not a security risk, but rather a victim of aggressive familial interference. He used the corporate euphemism, but I saw the respect in his eyes. I had prioritized the firm over the tribe. I was one of them now. But while the corporate front stabilized, the domestic front disintegrated into a digital guerrilla war. It started on Facebook. I don't have Facebook anymore. I deleted it years ago as a general hygiene practice for my mental health, but my friend Sarah, the real estate agent who sold the house, sent me screenshots. Brielle had posted a photo of herself crying. It was a selfie, taken in the bathroom mirror of the Holiday Inn Express, with the sad beige shower curtain in the background. The caption was a masterclass in weaponized victimhood. I have never felt so betrayed. My own sister sold her house behind our backs and let strangers throw me out on the street. I have nowhere to go. Family is supposed to protect you, not trade you for a paycheck. Homeless betrayal sisters. The comments were predictable. Her friends, a collection of enablers and drama tourists, were piling on. OMG, that is awful. Who does that to their sister? Stay strong, babe. Karma will get her. Then Lydia joined the fray. She didn't post publicly, but she began a whisper campaign through the family WhatsApp group, which I had left in direct messages to extended relatives. My cousin Mike, the one I had blocked, apparently screenshot her messages and sent them to my old roommate, who forwarded them to me. Madeline has changed, Lydia wrote to my Aunt Carol. She has become so cold. She lied to us about the rental. She set a trap for Brielle. We are worried about her mental state. She is cutting everyone off. Please pray for her heart to soften. It was brilliant. She was framing my boundary as a mental health crisis. She wasn't the abuser. She was the concerned mother of a troubled daughter. She was trying to socially isolate me so that I would have no choice but to return to them for validation. Then came Grant's legal threat. He didn't have a lawyer. Of course, he wouldn't pay for one. He sent me an email which was routed to my litigation hold folder, but I checked it for monitoring purposes, drafted in what he thought was legalese. Notice of intent to sue for fraudulent misrepresentation. The subject line read, in the email, he claimed that by telling them the house was a corporate rental, I had entered into a verbal contract that implied they had usage rights, a logic that defied all known laws of physics and jurisprudence. He demanded damages for the distress caused by the eviction and the loss of expected housing. He was bluffing. He was trying to scare me into writing a check. I did not reply on Facebook. I did not reply to the email. I did not text back. Instead, I hired a lawyer in Raleigh, a shark named Eleanor, who specialized in high-conflict civil litigation. I paid her retainer up front. Send a cease and desist, I told her. To Grant, Lydia, and Brielle Knight. Cite defamation regarding the online posts. Cite harassment regarding the emails. And cite the specific statutes regarding frivolous litigation if Grant files anything. You want to go hard? Eleanor asked. I want to go nuclear, I said. They think this is a family squabble. I want them to understand it is a legal war. The letters went out via certified mail. The silence that followed was brief. It was the silence of a trapped animal looking for a new exit. Brielle, realizing that the sad selfie strategy wasn't getting her a house, decided to get creative. She needed to prove residency. She had Googled tenant laws and convinced herself that if she could prove she received mail at the house, she could claim illegal eviction. This led to the mailbox incident. It was a Tuesday afternoon. Marissa was at work, but the Ring camera was active. I received a notification from Marissa, check your email. Sending video. I opened the file. The video was crisp. 1080p resolution. A red car pulled up to the curb of 140 Maple Drive. Brielle got out. She was wearing sunglasses and a hoodie, looking like a celebrity trying to avoid paparazzi, or a burglar trying to be inconspicuous. She walked up the driveway. She didn't go to the door. She went straight to the mailbox. She opened it. She reached in. I watched, fascinated by the audacity. She was committing a federal crime, mail theft on camera, to prove a civil lie residency. She pulled out a stack of envelopes. She rifled through them. She was looking for something specific, maybe a letter she had mailed to herself, or maybe just anything with my name on it that she could use to say, "See, Madeline still lives here, so I can too." But Marissa and Caleb had already forwarded my mail. The only thing in that box was junk mail addressed to current resident. Brielle shoved the flyers back in, slammed the mailbox shut, and stomped back to her car. "She is unbelievable," I whispered to my screen. Marissa texted, "She took the Bed Bath Beyond coupon. Does that count as theft?" "It counts as tampering with a federal mailbox," I replied. "Send this to Officer Miller." Marissa filed for the restraining order that afternoon. The video was the smoking gun. It showed a clear pattern of returning to the property despite a police warning. The judge granted a temporary order of protection. Grant, Lydia, and Brielle were legally barred from coming within 500 feet of 140 Maple Drive or the Lane family. This should have been the end, but entropy is a powerful force. Brielle, desperate and running out of money the hotel stay I paid for had ended, and she was likely sleeping on Lydia's couch, making everyone miserable, made a fatal error. She contacted her ex-boyfriend, Tyler. She told Tyler that she had left some things at her house, meaning my old house, and she needed help getting them. She lied to him. She told him that I was holding her stuff hostage and that the new people were just house sitters. Tyler, who was not the sharpest tool in the shed but wanted to be the hero, drove his truck to Maple Drive. He didn't just walk to the mailbox. He walked to the back door. He started banging on it. "Yo, open up," he shouted. "I am here for Brielle's stuff." Marissa was home. She was terrified. She saw a strange man pounding on her back door, shouting about Brielle. She hit the panic button on her alarm system. The police arrived in 3 minutes. They found Tyler trying to pry open the screen door. They arrested him. When they questioned him, he spilled everything. "Brielle sent me. She said it was her house. She said you guys stole her stuff." The police called Brielle. This is the part that gave me the grim satisfaction of a prophecy fulfilled. Brielle, facing the reality that she had sent her ex-boyfriend to commit a felony, panicked. She didn't defend him. She didn't take responsibility. She blamed me, according to the police report. She told the officer, "My sister told me I could get my stuff. Madeline said it was okay. She set us up. She tried to pin the solicitation of burglary on me, but I had the receipts. I had the cease and desist letter. I had the emails telling them to stay away. I had the restraining order that had been served to her that morning. When the police called me to verify her story, I simply forwarded them the entire Night Defense Exhibit A folder. 'Officer,' I said, 'I have a restraining order against her. Why would I send her ex-boyfriend to break into a house I no longer own?' 'Understood, Ms. Knight,' the officer said. 'It appears your sister is confused.' 'She is not confused,' I said. 'She is malicious.' Tyler was charged with attempted burglary. Brielle was cited for conspiracy and violation of the restraining order by proxy. The fallout was immediate. Lydia called me from a burner phone because I had blocked her number. 'Madeline,' she screamed when I answered, not recognizing the number. 'What have you done? Tyler is in jail. Brielle is being charged. You have to stop this. Call the police and tell them it was a misunderstanding.' 'I did not call the police,' I said calmly. 'Marissa Lane called the police because a man was breaking into her house. I had nothing to do with it.' 'You have to fix it,' Lydia wailed. 'You have lawyers. You have money. Bail him out. Get Brielle a lawyer. They are going to ruin her record.' 'I am not fixing it,' I said. 'I am the one who gave the police the evidence that proved I wasn't involved. If Brielle lied to Tyler and sent him there, that is her crime. Mom, not mine.' 'You are a monster,' Lydia spat. 'You are watching your family burn, and you are doing nothing.' I am not watching you burn, I said. I am watching you play with matches after I told you the house was made of wood. Grant is going to do nothing, I cut her off. Because if he contacts me or the Lanes again, he violates the order of protection, and he goes to jail too. Do you want Grant in a cell next to Tyler? Because that is where this is heading? Lydia gasped. The reality of the power shift finally hit her. I wasn't just saying no, I was enforcing the law. Why are you doing this? She whispered. We just wanted the house. No, I said. You didn't just want the house. You wanted the right to take what was mine. You wanted to prove that no matter how successful I got, I was still just a resource for Brielle. You wanted ownership of me. That is not true, she sobbed. It is true, I said, and that is why I sold it, not for the money, but to show you that I am not property, I am a person, and you lost me. I hung up. I sat in my office. The city of Chicago was gray and rainy outside. I felt tired, deeply, deeply tired. It was the exhaustion of someone who has been holding a door shut against a hurricane for 30 years. But the door was finally locked. The legal system had bolted it. I looked at the invoice from my lawyer. $5,000. It was a lot of money. But then I looked at the police report regarding Tyler's arrest. I looked at the restraining order. I realized that for the first time, the chaos wasn't in my living room. It was in theirs. They were dealing with bail bondsmen. They were dealing with court dates. They were dealing with the consequences I used to shield them from. I was free, but I knew the final showdown was coming. The restraining order hearing was set for next week. I would have to fly back to Raleigh. I would have to see them in court. And I knew Grant would try one last Hail Mary. He would try to charm the judge. He would try to leverage his good standing in the community. He would try to make me look like the ungrateful daughter one last time. I opened my laptop. I started preparing my testimony. I wasn't going to bring emotions to court. I was going to bring data. I was going to bring the timeline. I was going to bring the truth. They wanted a family reunion. Fine, we would have one, under oath. The notification for the mediation hearing arrived on a Monday morning, a crisp digital summons that appeared on my calendar like a scar. It was scheduled for Friday at 10 o'clock in the morning at the Wake County Justice Center. The subject line was Clinical Temporary Restraining Order, Lane v. Knight et al. I was not a named defendant, but I was a subpoenaed witness. My testimony was the hinge upon which the door of justice would swing. I booked my flight to Raleigh. I booked a hotel room downtown, far away from the suburbs, far away from Maple Drive. On Tuesday, 3 days before the hearing, my phone rang. It was a number I did not recognize, but the area code was local to Raleigh. I answered, expecting my lawyer. Eleanor. Madeline, the voice said. It was Grant. He must have borrowed a phone from a friend, or perhaps he was calling from his office landline, thinking I wouldn't recognize the corporate extension. His voice was different. The bluster was gone. The rage was gone. In its place was a wheedling, desperate tone that I found infinitely more repulsive. Madeline, please do not hang up, he said quickly. We need to talk, not as enemies, as father and daughter. I am listening, I said. I hit the record button on my call app. In North Carolina, only one party needs to consent to recording. I consented. This has gone too far, Grant said. The lawyers, the police, it is a mess. Maddie, it is costing a fortune. And it is hurting people. Real people. It is hurting the people you harassed, I said. It is hurting me, he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. Word is getting around. Maddie. People at the club. People at the bank. Someone told my partner that I was being investigated for stalking. Stalking me. Actions have consequences, I said. Madeline, listen to me, he said. I have a deal on the table, a commercial real estate deal. If this restraining order becomes permanent if my name is in the public record attached to a criminal harassment case, the investors will pull out. They do strict background checks now. I could lose the commission. I could lose my standing. He wasn't sorry for terrorizing a pregnant woman. He was sorry because it might cost him a commission. "What do you want, Dad?" "I want you to call Caleb Lane," he said. "You know him. You sold him the house. Just call him. Tell him it was a misunderstanding. Tell him I am a good man. Tell him I was just a confused father trying to help his daughter. If he drops the petition, this all goes away. We can settle it in the family." "You want me to lie to a federal witness to save your business deal?" "It is not a lie," Grant insisted. "It is context. Just tell him to drop it. Please, Madeline, for the family. If I lose this deal, I can't help Brielle with her legal fees. She will have a record." "So you are asking me to use my professional credibility to clean up your mess, so you can continue to enable Brielle?" "I am asking you to be my daughter," he snapped, the old anger leaking through. "I will see you in court on Friday," I said. I hung up. I sat there, staring at the phone. The audacity was breathtaking, but it also triggered a memory, a deep itch of a memory about family deals and paperwork. I opened my laptop. I logged into my credit monitoring service. I had done a shallow dive years ago, but now, with the eyes of a forensic auditor, I went deep. I pulled archived credit reports from 10 years ago. I pulled old tax returns I had kept copies of. I started to see a pattern. There was a credit card opened in my name when I was 19. It had a limit of $2,000. It was maxed out and then paid off 6 months later. I had never opened that card. There was a co-signed auto loan for a car I never drove. The primary borrower, Grant Knight. It was paid off, but my name had been used to lower the interest rate. There was a small personal loan taken out against a savings bond my grandmother had left me. The signature on the withdrawal slip was a shaky approximation of my own. I realized with a jolt of nausea that 140 Maple Drive wasn't the first time they had viewed me as an asset. I had been their silent partner for years. They had used my credit score, my clean record, my name, to smooth over their own financial potholes. And because they always paid it back mostly, they told themselves it wasn't stealing, it was borrowing. But without consent, borrowing is theft. I realized that selling the house wasn't just about moving to Chicago, it was about closing the bank. It was about cutting off the supply line that had allowed them to live beyond their means financially and emotionally for decades. Wednesday evening. Lydia called. She used Aunt Carol's phone. "Madeline." Her voice was soft, weepy. It was the voice she used when she wanted to evoke the image of the saintly mother. "Hello, Mom. I was just looking at photo albums," she said. "I found the pictures from your college graduation. You looked so happy. We were so proud of you." "I remember," I said. "You left early because Brielle broke a nail." "Oh, stop it," she said, dismissing my reality. "We have always loved you. We sacrificed everything for you girls. Do you remember when Dad worked 2 jobs to pay for your braces?" "I remember," I said. "And do you remember that I paid for my own college tuition so you could buy Brielle a car?" "We did the best we could," she sniffed. "Madeline, please, don't testify against us. Don't go into that room and tell strangers that we are bad people. It breaks my heart. Brielle is so scared. She says she's going to go over there and apologize to Mr. Lane herself. She wants to make it right." My blood ran cold. "She is going to do what she wants to go apologize," Lydia said. "She wrote a letter. She wants to hand it to them, to show them she is a good girl." "Mom," I said, my voice sharp. "Listen to me. If Brielle steps 1 foot onto that property, she will be arrested. The temporary order is in effect. Contacting them in person, by letter, by carrier pigeon is a violation. She will go to jail. Do not let her do this." "But she just wants to explain," Lydia cried. "If they just see her heart." "They don't care about her heart," I shouted. "They care about their safety. Tell her to stay away." "You are so hard," Lydia whispered. "You have let the city harden you." "The city didn't harden me," I said. "You did." I hung up. I immediately sent a text to Marissa. "Heads up, My mother indicated Brielle might try to come over to apologize. Do not open the door. Call the police if you see her. Marissa replied instantly. Thanks. Caleb is working from home. We are ready. Then I sat down and prepared the file that I called the one-time file. It was a spreadsheet. In column A, the date. In column B, the incident. In column C, the cost, financial or emotional. Item unauthorized credit card. 2009. Cost $2,000. Credit limit risk. Item Brielle's rent bailout. 2018. Cost $1,500. Item car accident. Deductible 2020. Cost $500. Item the house break-in 2025. Cost the relationship. I summed it up. The total wasn't just in dollars. It was in years of my life spent managing their chaos. I printed it out. I put it in a crisp manila folder. This wasn't for the judge. This was for me. It was my reminder. In case I wavered. In case Grant looked old and frail in the courtroom. In case Lydia cried. I would look at this folder and remember I have already paid. I have paid enough. Thursday. I flew to Raleigh. The air was humid and thick. I checked into the hotel. I met with Eleanor, my lawyer. They are desperate, Eleanor said, reviewing the voicemail from Grant. This is witness tampering. He is asking you to alter your testimony to Caleb Lane to benefit his business deal. We can use this. I want to use everything, I said. Are you sure? Eleanor looked at me. Once we play these cards, Madeline, there is no going back. You are essentially branding your father as a fraud and your sister as a criminal conspirator. They branded themselves, I said. I am just reading the label. Okay, Eleanor said. Tomorrow is going to be rough. It is a mediation first, to see if we can agree on the terms of the permanent order without a full trial. But given their attitude, I doubt they will agree to anything. They won't, I said. They think they can talk their way out of it. They think they can charm the mediator. They can't charm facts, Eleanor said. Friday morning broke gray and rainy. I put on my best suit, a navy blue power suit that I wore when I had to fire people. I pulled my hair back. I put on my glasses. I walked into the Wake County Justice Center. I went through the metal detector. I saw them in the hallway outside the mediation room. Grant was wearing his Sunday suit, but it looked a little loose on him. Lydia was wearing a cardigan and pearls. Clutching her purse like a shield, Brielle was wearing a dress that was too short for court, looking sullen and angry. They saw me. Lydia took a step forward, her arms opening. Madeline. I stepped back. Eleanor stepped between us. Please keep your distance, Eleanor said coolly. My client is a witness for the petitioners. Grant looked at me. His eyes were cold, hard flints. He realized the family discount was expired. You are actually doing this, he said. Good morning, Grant, I said. We walked into the room. It was a long table. On one side sat Caleb and Marissa Lane. Marissa looked tired, but Caleb looked like a mountain. Their lawyer sat next to them. On the other side sat my family. They had found a lawyer, probably a friend of Grant's, who owed him a favor. Looking disheveled and unprepared. I sat at the end of the table, alone, with Eleanor, the mediator. A retired judge named Mr. Henderson opened the file. We are here to discuss the petition for a permanent restraining order filed by Mr. and Mrs. Lane against Grant, Lydia, and Brielle Knight. Mr. Henderson said, the allegations are trespassing, harassment, and attempted burglary. Objection to burglary, Grant's lawyer mumbled. That was a third party. Initiated by the respondent. The Lane's lawyer countered sharp. Let's look at the facts. Mr. Henderson said, Mr. Knight, you claim you had a right to be on the property. My daughter owns it, Grant blurted out. Or she did. It was a family misunderstanding. We have a key. I have a statement here. Mr. Henderson said, picking up a piece of paper. From Madeline Knight. He looked at me. Ms. Knight, did you give your family permission to enter the property on the date in question? The room went silent. Grant stared at me. He was silently willing me to lie. Just say yes. Just say it was a mix-up. Save us. Lydia was weeping softly into a tissue. Brielle was glaring at the table. I looked at Caleb. He was holding Marissa's hand. I saw the fear and the exhaustion in their posture. They didn't ask for this. They just bought a house. I looked at the folder in front of me, the spreadsheet, the years of theft. I looked Grant in the eye. "No, Your Honor," I said. "I did not." Grant flinched as if I had slapped him. "In fact," I continued, "I explicitly informed them in writing on 3 separate occasions that the house was no longer available for their use. I have the emails here. They entered the property knowing they had no right to be there. They used a key I had asked them to return multiple times." "She is lying," Brielle shouted. "She said we could stay there, she promised." "Do you have that promise in writing, Mr. Henderson?" asked Brielle. She said it. "I have an email from Brielle dated 2 days after the sale," I said, sliding a paper across the table, "where she asks me for money for rent. If I had promised her the house, why would she ask for rent money for her apartment?" Logic, cold, hard logic. Brielle's mouth opened and closed. "Mr. Knight?" Mr. Henderson turned to Grant. "You are a businessman. Surely you understand that a deed transfer terminates any prior informal access agreements." "I was trying to protect my daughter," Grant stammered. "Madeline abandoned her." "That is a parenting opinion, not a legal defense," Mr. Henderson said. Then Caleb spoke. "Mr. Knight," Caleb said. His voice was deep and filled the room. "You threatened to ruin me. You told me I didn't know who I was messing with. You called my employer." Grant went pale. I was upset. "I have the email from your daughter," Caleb said, nodding at me. "Detailed the history of your behavior. It seems this is a pattern. You bully people to get what you want." Caleb leaned forward. "I am the CFO of a Fortune 500 company," Caleb said. "You are a local real estate broker. You are right. Mr. Knight, one of us is about to be ruined, but it isn't me." Grant shrank. He physically seemed to deflate. He realized, finally, that he wasn't the big fish. He was the plankton. "We are prepared to move to a full trial," Caleb's lawyer said, "where we will introduce the video of Brielle tampering with the mail, the police report of the break-in, and Ms. Knight's testimony regarding financial coercion." Mr. Henderson looked at Grant's lawyer. "Counselor, if this goes to trial, your clients are looking at potential criminal liability, not just civil." "The mail tampering alone is a federal offense," Grant's lawyer whispered frantically to Grant. Grant listened, his face turning gray. "What do you want?" Grant whispered. "We want a permanent restraining order." Caleb said, 5 years, no contact, 500 feet, for all 3 of you, and a written apology to my wife. And, I spoke up. Everyone looked at me. "I want a separate agreement," I said. "Grant and Lydia Knight will remove my name from any and all shared financial documents, insurance policies, and emergency contact lists within 30 days. Proof must be provided to my counsel." "We can't just," Lydia started. 30 days, I said. "Or I hand over the file about the credit card fraud from 2009 to the district attorney." It was a bluff. The statute of limitations had likely passed, but Lydia didn't know that. Grant didn't know that. They only knew that I remembered. Grant looked at me. There was no love left in his eyes, only fear. "Fine," he croaked. "We agree," his lawyer said. Mr. Henderson nodded. "Draft the order. We are done here." We stood up. I gathered my papers. I didn't look at my family. I walked toward the door. "Madeline," Grant said. I stopped. I didn't turn around. "You are dead to us," he said. I turned then. I looked at him, and I smiled. A real, genuine smile. "Dad," I said, "I have been dead to you for years. I was just a ghost who wrote checks. Now, I am finally alive." I walked out of the room. I walked past Brielle, who was crying silently. I walked past Lydia, who couldn't even look at me. I walked out of the courthouse and into the rain. I pulled out my phone. I deleted the Knight folder from my contacts. I had one more stop to make before I flew back to Chicago. I needed to go to the bank. I needed to close the last joint account, the one my grandmother had set up. The countdown was over. The explosion had happened, and I was the only one walking away from the rubble. The conference room inside the Wake County Justice Center was windowless, smelling of floor wax and stale coffee, a fitting environment for the end of my family life. We were not in a courtroom yet, but the arrangement was undeniable. On one side of the long mahogany table sat the plaintiffs, Caleb and Marissa Lane, flanked by their high-powered attorney. On the other side sat the respondents Grant, Lydia, and Brielle Knight, huddled together with their disheveled lawyer, who looked like he would rather be anywhere else. I sat at the head of the table, alone. I was the witness. I was the pivot point. My lawyer, Eleanor, had arranged my seating specifically. I was equidistant from both parties, a visual representation of my neutrality. But as I looked at my parents, I knew there was nothing neutral about the fire burning in my chest. The mediator, Mr. Henderson, cleared his throat. He was a man who had seen everything, yet he looked at my family with a mixture of confusion and pity. "We have reviewed the temporary petition," Mr. Henderson said. "We are here to see if a permanent agreement can be reached regarding the restraining order and the no-contact directives." Grant leaned forward. He was trying to summon his business leader persona, but his collar was tight, and beads of sweat were visible on his forehead. "This is all a misunderstanding," Grant said, his voice booming slightly too loud for the small room. "My wife and I simply wanted to help our daughter. Brielle, we were under the impression that the house was still family property. We are the victims here, really. We were humiliated by the police." "Humiliated," Caleb Lane repeated. He did not raise his voice. He sat with the stillness of a predator. "You broke into my home while my pregnant wife was inside. You screamed at her. You claimed ownership of a property you have never owned." "Madeline owned it," Lydia interjected, her voice trembling. She looked at me, her eyes wet with weaponized tears. "Madeline, tell them you always said the house was for the family. Tell them we had a standing agreement." I looked at my mother. For 36 years, that look would have broken me. It would have triggered the automatic response to fix, to soothe, to lie for her. I opened my folder. "There was no agreement," I said. My voice was steady, clearer than it had ever been. "In fact, I have documented proof of the opposite." I slid a piece of paper across the table to the mediator. "Exhibit A," I said. An email dated 3 weeks prior to the sale, sent to Grant, Lydia, and Brielle. Subject line house status. The text reads, "Please be advised that the house is being turned over to corporate management. No family access is permitted under any circumstances. Please return all keys immediately." Lydia gasped. She remembered the email. She had ignored it because she ignored everything that did not suit her narrative. "And here," I continued, sliding a second paper, a text message from Brielle dated 2 days after the sale. "Maddie, since you are moving, can you give me money for my rent? If she believed she had the right to live in my house, why was she negotiating rent for her apartment?" Brielle slammed her hand on the table. "You promised me verbally. You said at Christmas that you would always take care of me." "Taking care of you does not mean giving you the keys to a $450,000 asset that belongs to someone else," I said. The mediator looked at the documents. He looked at Grant. "Mr. Knight, the timeline is irrefutable. You used a key on a date subsequent to the sale. You entered without permission. That is trespassing." Grant's lawyer leaned in and whispered something to him, likely telling him to shut up. But Grant Knight does not shut up when he feels cornered. He feels the need to dominate. "It is a civil matter," Grant insisted. "It is a dispute between family members about property rights. It has nothing to do with these people." He gestured dismissively at Caleb and Marissa. Caleb Lane shifted in his chair. He placed a hand on a stack of files in front of him. "Actually, Mr. Knight," Caleb said, "it has everything to do with us, and it has everything to do with you. Caleb opened his file. It wasn't legal paperwork. It was a corporate dossier. I spoke with my security team at Apex Distribution yesterday, Caleb said. We run background checks on all potential threats to executive leadership. When you threatened to ruin me in my driveway, you triggered that protocol? Grant laughed nervously. Threats I was just blowing off steam, man to man. In my world, we do not blow off steam, Caleb said coldly. We assess risk, and here is what we found. Caleb slid a single sheet of paper toward Grant. Your real estate license is up for renewal next month, Caleb noted. And your partnership in the downtown development project, the one you are counting on, requires a clean compliance record regarding ethical business practices. Grant went pale. How do you know about that? Because Apex is the primary underwriter for that development, Caleb said. The air left the room. It was sucked out by the sheer magnitude of the coincidence, or perhaps it was karma finally balancing the books. The man Grant had threatened, the man whose house he had broken into, was the chief financial officer of the company holding the purse strings to Grant's retirement. This incident, Caleb tapped the police report, combined with the evidence Madeline provided regarding your history of financial coercion and boundary violations, has created a problem for you. We have flagged your profile internally. You can't do that, Grant stammered. That is my business. That is my livelihood. You made it my business when you attacked my family, Caleb said. We are not pulling the funding because of Madeline. We are reviewing your participation because you, Grant Knight, have demonstrated a complete disregard for property law and legal boundaries. If you will break into a house because you feel entitled, what will you do with our investors' money? It was the twist that none of them saw coming. They thought they were fighting a family squabble where emotions ruled. They didn't realize they had stepped into the arena of high-level corporate governance, where character is currency, and Grant was bankrupt. Please, Lydia whispered, we will lose everything. Grant turned to me. His face was a mask of pure terror. The arrogance was gone. The bluster was gone. He was just a man looking at the abyss he had dug for himself. Madeline, he pleaded. Madeline, you have to stop this. You work in this industry. You know how this works. Just tell him. He reached out a hand across the table, palm up. Tell him I am a good man. Grant begged. Tell him it was just a father's love. One sentence, Maddie. Just say one sentence to help your father. If you don't, the deal dies. The commission dies. We will have nothing. The room went silent. Even the lawyers stopped shuffling papers. Everyone looked at me. This was it. The moment I had been trained for since birth. The moment where I was supposed to jump on the grenade. All I had to do was soften the blow. All I had to do was say, Caleb, please, he is harmless. Don't ruin his career. I looked at Grant's hand. I looked at the gold watch on his wrist. A watch he bought the year he told me he couldn't afford to help me with my student loans. I looked at Brielle, who was watching me with expectant eyes, waiting for the fixer to fix it. I looked at Lydia, who was already composing her victim's speech. I took a deep breath. The air in the room didn't smell like floor wax anymore. It smelled like the ozone before a storm. No, I said. Grant froze. What? You are asking me to vouch for your character, I said, my voice ringing with a clarity that surprised even me. But your character is exactly what put you in this chair. You are asking me to tell Miss Lee that you are trustworthy, when I know for a fact that you are not. Madeline, Lydia shrieked. You are asking me to take the blame, I continued, looking Grant dead in the eye. You want me to tell him that I caused this confusion so that you can keep your reputation. You want me to absorb the impact one last time. I stood up. I smoothed the front of my blazer. I am done absorbing, I said. I am not your shield anymore. Dad, you broke the law. You threatened a corporate executive. You ignored my warnings. This is not my mess. It is yours. I am your father, Grant roared, slamming his fist down. And he is the victim of your crime. I pointed to Caleb. I will not lie to save you from the consequences of your own arrogance. Grant slumped back in his chair. He looked small. He looked defeated. Mr. Henderson, the mediator, cleared his throat again. The tension was palpable. "I think we have heard enough," Mr. Henderson said. "Mr. Knight, based on the evidence presented and the testimony of the witness, I am recommending the court uphold the permanent restraining order, 5 years, no contact with the Lane family, 500 feet distance at all times." "And Brielle?" Caleb asked. "Ms. Knight," the mediator turned to Brielle, "you are included in this order. Furthermore, because of the incident with the mail tampering, you are being issued a formal warning. 1 more violation, 1 text, 1 drive-by, 1 letter, and you will be facing federal charges. Do you understand?" Brielle nodded, tears streaming down her face. She looked at me with pure hatred, but beneath the hate, there was fear. For the first time, she realized I wasn't going to save her. And regarding the Knight family's contact with the witness, Eleanor, my lawyer, asked, "I am granting a separate no-contact order," the mediator said. "Grant, Lydia, and Brielle Knight are to have no contact with Madeline Knight for a period of 2 years, unless through legal counsel for the purpose of settling the financial separation." "Financial separation," Lydia whispered. "Madeline is removing her name from all shared assets." Eleanor said, "We will be sending the paperwork on Monday." It was over. The gavel hadn't banged, but the judgment was final. I gathered my files. I picked up the folder with the one-time spreadsheet. I didn't need to show it to anyone. I knew what was in it. I walked toward the door. "You sold us out," Grant hissed as I passed him. "You sold your own family." I stopped. I turned one last time. I looked at the 3 people who had defined my universe for 3 decades. 2 weeks ago, I sold a house, I said. But today I sold the access you had to my life. And honestly, Dad, it was the best deal I ever made. I turned my back on them. I walked out the door. I walked down the long hallway of the Justice Center. My heels clicked on the marble floor, a rhythmic, solitary sound. I pushed through the heavy double doors and stepped out onto Fayetteville Street. The rain had stopped. The sun was breaking through the clouds, washing the wet pavement in a brilliant, blinding light. The air tasted clean. It tasted like rain and asphalt and possibilities. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs completely. There was no tightness in my chest, no headache behind my left eye. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I opened my contacts. I went to the ICE setting. In case of emergency, for 10 years. It had been Grant Knight. I deleted it. I typed in a new name, Sarah, my friend, the one who had helped me sell the house, the one who had told me for years that I deserved better. Then I added a second contact, Dr. Evans, my therapist in Chicago. I looked at the screen. My emergency contacts were no longer the people who caused the emergency. I put the phone away. I hailed a cab to take me to the airport. I was going back to Chicago. I was going back to my glass apartment, my demanding job, and my quiet, peaceful life. I wasn't happy in the way people in movies are happy, with jumping and cheering. I was happy in the way a survivor is happy when they reach the shore. I was tired. I was battered. But I was on solid ground. I had lost my parents. I had lost my sister. But as the cab pulled away from the curb, leaving the courthouse in the rearview mirror, I realized I had finally found the one person I had been missing all along. Myself. Thank you so much for listening to this story of boundaries, betrayal, and ultimate freedom. I want to know where you are listening from today. Drop your state or country in the comments below, and let me know. Have you ever had to make a tough choice to cut off toxic family members? If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the Maya Revenge Stories channel, hit that like button, and smash the hype button to help this story get recommended to more people who might need to hear it. See you in the next video.